on your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, Andy Burnham has promised to rebalance power in Britain if he becomes the next Prime Minister. The new MP for Makerfield has confirmed he plans to move some Number 10 operations to Manchester.
It will only be based here. The job of Number 10 North will be to make power flow into the Midlands, into the southwest, into the east of England, as much as into the northeast. Number 10 North will be the nerve centre of a rewired Britain.
In his first speech since returning to Westminster, he promised to give regions the ability to take control of areas like transport and housing. Northern correspondent at the Financial Times, Jen Williams, has told Tonight with Andrew Marr there are still a lot of unanswered questions.
Exactly what that looks like, we don't yet know. And I think, an awful lot of devil will be in the detail, which will then determine how actually radical that is, because there were big words applied by Andy Burnham in that speech today in terms of his radicalism. What was not in the speech is any detail around how things will be paid for.
Mr Burnham is still currently unchallenged in the race to replace Sir Keir Starmer. If no other Labour MPs make a leadership bid, he'll become Prime Minister on the 20th of July. MP for East Thanet and Vice Chair of the PLP, Polly Billington, has told Andrew Marr she hopes he'll be more collaborative than his predecessor.
That's really where some of the things have broken down most recently, because it's been a bit brittle. It's like you're my way or the highway. And that has ended up with people who have been extremely thoughtful and extremely constructive in how they've wanted to stand up for their communities, have ended up on the wrong side of a pretty brutal regime.
Tory leader Kemi Badenoch says the UK will see a summer of chaos as Mr Burnham decides his cabinet. Also this evening, resident doctors in England have voted to accept the government's latest pay offer. It includes an average uplift of 6.6% and a return to standards from 2016. But the British Medical Association has warned they still aim to see pay at 2008 levels. Dr Jack Fletcher from the BMA has told LBC this is a step in the right direction.
And all we're saying to the government is let's continue that journey. Let's make sure that we are moving towards restoring that lost value of pay. Obviously, the jobs certainly will hopefully go somewhere to fixing this ridiculous jobs crisis. And hopefully, if the pay review body next year does continue to make progress, then the NHS doesn't need to see any more industrial action.
The government says the deal means pay will be 35.2% higher than 4 years ago. The US Supreme Court has rejected Donald Trump's appeal after he was sued for sexual abuse. The president was told to pay E. Jean Carroll $5 million in damages in 2023 over the civil case. He denies the allegations that he assaulted her in the 1990s. The number of children referred to mental health services in England has risen by 10% in a year to more than 1 million, or 1 in every 10. The data from 2024 to 2025 is almost double the number for 2018 to 2019, with anxiety the main issue. Dame Rachel D'Souza, who's behind the report, told Andrew Marr social media plays a part.
We have this big debate, should we ban it, should we not? When I talk to children across the country, they're saying we're spending hours on it, it's making us feel upset, we're trying to cut down, we don't know how to get off it, and all this stuff is beaming in instead of playing out and having a healthy life.
And British number 1 Cameron Norrie is out of Wimbledon after losing to world number 144 Michael Zeng in the first round. He went down in 5 sets. Both Jack Draper and Emma Raducanu have also pulled out due to injury. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 23 points at 10,484. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.15. LBC weather tonight: rain spreads across the north, heavy in places, staying mostly dry in the south, a low of 7. A wet start in the north tomorrow before turning brighter later with some showers. Drier further south with showers in the afternoon, a high of 25 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 7 on LBC. Welcome to the programme. It's good to be back. Nothing much happened while I was away, did it? What is it? Every time I decide to have a little break, some big news story breaks and I'm sitting at home or wherever I am thinking, why have I taken time off? Russ on the text here says, Iain goes on holiday again, chaos ensues. Back finally, so let's get down to it. Well, without further ado, let's get down to it indeed. Let me remind you, if you'd like to watch the programme as opposed to just listen to it, you can do so on Global Player, on the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel. And if you do, you'll see not the usual suit and tie. It looks as if I'm still on holiday, doesn't it? Hey. No, I'm not. I am back. Right. Andy Burnham, our imminent Prime Minister, as I'm calling him, he made what was billed as a very big speech this morning in Manchester at the People's History Museum. And it was quite an interesting listen, actually. Quite broad brush, though. And I think a lot of people are wondering, to use that famous, was it Ronald Reagan said this to Walter Mondale in a presidential debate, where's the beef? I may have got that quite slightly wrong, but I think the assertion that is still relevant here. Where is the beef? Because you can say all sorts of things. Well, I want to devolve power. I believe in localism. I think power should be devolved to the lowest local level. That's not a radical thing for a politician to say. In fact, most politicians of all parties say it, and then as soon as they get into power, they do the exact opposite. He says he wants to introduce a massive new council house building programme. The first Prime Minister, I mean, let's call him that because that's what he is going to be, the first Prime Minister to say this since really the 1950s or 1960s. But again, where's the detail? How is it going to be paid for without breaking these famous fiscal rules? So that's really what I want to talk to you this evening about, particularly in the first hour. We'll talk about council housing, particularly after 9 o'clock. But let's look at the devolution policy that he wants to bring in, create more local mayors, give local councils more powers. But if they have more powers, they'll want to spend more money. Where's the money coming from? 0345 6060 973. Bethany Dawson is here, LBC's political correspondent. Now, you started 2 weeks ago, just when I went on holiday, Bethany, on the day of the by-election. It's all your fault, isn't it?
I'm really sorry. It is my fault. So if anyone's ever fancying a big by-election or a change in government, if you give me a ring, I'll move jobs.
Right, so take us through what Andy Burnham said this morning. Were there hostages to fortune in this speech? Was it a very inspirational speech? Obviously, the people in the hall it went down really well with them, but I suppose it was always going to. But what do you think the great British public made of it?
So I think Andy Burnham was trying to invoke some hope with this speech. He was trying to invoke some direction. He was trying to say, this is what I think, partly because we really need to know that, but also because he sort of wanted to counter what Keir Starmer has been doing, or at least been criticised for doing, which is not really setting out that story, setting out his stall. Whereas Andy Burnham has said, this is what I am going to do, and this is why. However, he didn't necessarily say how. Now, some may suggest that that's fair. He came into Parliament a week ago. But when you are somebody that is essentially waiting to pick up the keys for number 10, you should probably get some policy detail in there. And when I spoke to MPs, I didn't find anybody that was unhappy with what Andy Burnham set out. A lot said that they were really relieved to feel like there was some direction for the Labour Party. They, approved of what he said. They liked that it seemed, some would say like revolutionary. It was a big deal. It was big change. It was very energetic. However, the criticism I did find was that people essentially said it was kind of vibes-based. It was a very nice thing, but exactly how you do it wasn't there.
That word vibes, I think Andy Burnham, we can legitimately already describe him as the vibes Prime Minister. Now, I quite like having a Prime Minister who makes you feel good. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But you've got to have the heft behind it, haven't you? It can't all be presentation and black T-shirts and fluttering eyelashes, as Kemi Badenoch would say.
And, Andy Burnham will not be solo when he's in number 10. He's, of course, going to have a cabinet. He's going to have ministers. He's going to have aides. He's going to have so many people around him. And there is an argument that once he has set out who those people are, which he said he will do at the end of the leadership process, then we will get a better idea of how things will be done, what the policies will look like, the speed at which policies will be implemented, oriented. However, it is objectively quite weird being in a space where we know somebody who is not currently the Prime Minister, is going to be the Prime Minister, who's not even a Secretary of State or a Minister, is a backbench MP. And we know vaguely some of the things they would like to do on, for example, devolution, but not at all on things like foreign affairs or defence or even health.
Well, of course, I think we have the Defence Investment Plan being released tomorrow. He didn't really mention that much. You're right. He's got no track record on foreign affairs. I don't think there's much evidence of him ever commenting on foreign policy. Now, in some ways, you could say, well, that's a strength because he's got a blank sheet of paper to start with. But when you're dealing with characters like President Xi, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, I think it'd be nice if we all had a little bit of a sort of inclination of what stance he might take, because it might be very different from Keir Starmer, but no one knows.
And again, that will probably come when we know who his foreign secretary is going to be. If it is someone with a vast, wealth of experience who really knows how to deal with the kind of characters you just listed, then that will fill in those gaps. But ultimately, we just don't know. And today's speech helped us a little bit on some areas. We picked up the vibes. But in terms of the big, frankly, really serious and scary questions, we just didn't get that much of an inclination. He did mention defence. It did come up, but it was in a new policy where he wants to ensure more sovereign manufacturing. So British organisations get priority for contracts in things like steelmaking and defence. That's very interesting. And again, it sort of runs with the vibes that we're looking at. But when it comes to...
And a benefit of Brexit, some might say.
Some may say. But when it comes to what he will do again, how will he manage Ukraine, Putin? How is he going to navigate the intricacies of Donald Trump? We just don't know.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's put that out to you as well. Do you worry that we actually just don't know enough about Andy Burnham? I think everyone wishes him well. I certainly do. I want whoever the Prime Minister of this country is, I want them to succeed. I don't care if I voted for them or not. I want them to succeed. I wanted Keir Starmer to succeed. And for all sorts of reasons, he hasn't. And we are where we are. And I think you have to be pretty unpatriotic if you don't wish Andy Burnham well. But is it possible to really wish him well when you don't really have much inkling of what he's going to do when he takes over on the 20th of July? I mean, I'm talking as if it's a done deal that there won't be a challenger. I don't think there will. But here we are with somebody who might know about that. Jim McMahon is Labour MP for Oldham West, Chadderton and Royton. And he was Minister for Local Government and English Devolution during the first year of Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. Jim, good to see you again.
Hi there.
First of all, what does it say about the state of the Parliamentary Labour Party that you have to import someone from outside to take over from Keir Starmer? There are 400 of you, and clearly none of you are good enough to take over from Keir Starmer.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that at all. But what you can't deny is that Andy Burnham has shown, one, that he has the courage of his conviction. The idea that you go from, quite a secure mayoral position to fight in a by-election that could well have been very marginal, to win that and come through has, I think, really kind of put the wind in the PLP sails, and people are confident. People have a spring in their step. People are optimistic. And, we're not too far away from the May elections where we've got an absolute trouncing in England, Scotland and Wales. And so, I do think there's a sense of optimism now. I think the speech today gives a real sense of the type of Prime Minister he will be, but also actually the culture that will exist. Because I think, for many of us, we do feel as though the kind of parts of the country that we represent are just not really taken account of in British politics. Those kind of working class, post-industrial towns where people are doing everything that's been asked of them. People are working hard. They're doing sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, but the rent levels are going through the roof. The bills are going through the roof and they still can't make ends meet. And I think we're getting to a point now where people's trust and confidence in politics has been eroded to such a point, people do not believe that politics can change anything.
But that's a huge responsibility, isn't it, for Andy Burnham? Because, I mean, Bethany mentioned the word vibes there. You can't be a good Prime Minister just by vibes alone. It doesn't work like that. You've got to have the substance behind the vibes. And if he then fails in the same way that Keir Starmer has failed to really connect with the people and people may say, well, we shouldn't be judging him after only 2 years. He hasn't had enough time. I think there are a lot of people that think that. But if Andy Burnham goes the same way, I mean, that's going to be really serious for British politics, isn't it?
I think that gives a disservice, though, to what he's done as Mayor of Greater Manchester. One, in terms of building a diverse team, and I think what's different as an incoming Prime Minister, potentially, is that he gets to choose his cabinet, but his cabinet has to reflect the broader Parliamentary Labour Party, the broader country in terms of geography, and all a range of issues. Was actually in the mayoral context, his cabinet, if you like, his lead members are made up of council leaders who he doesn't get to choose, but he has to find a way of working with those different interests in geography and politics to try and kind of bring people together around a common vision. And what we've done in Greater Manchester around transport, around housing, around the skills agenda and good jobs. You know, the kind of the Manhattan skyline isn't really the story. I don't think
Manhattan. I haven't heard that one before.
Oh, it's fantastic, but it is impressive. But the truth is, from the hill of Oldham, you can see the Manhattan skyline, and it can feel a million miles away if you're a kid growing up in the terrace streets of Oldham. And actually, the social progress that's being made on skills for working class kids and apprenticeships is a bit of an untold story, really. But it does display, I think, somebody that is more than just vibes, somebody that has delivered in the role and actually has challenged status quo. And I think that's what's needed.
But how much has it been down to him? Because I think a lot of people, and look, you're an MP for the area, I'm not. But from what I've read, a lot of people say, well, it's actually Sir Richard Leese did a lot of this. And Andy Burnham, OK, he's been there for 9 years, but he's claiming credit for a hell of a lot of things that were actually in place before he came along.
I don't think so. I mean, he has never denied that the foundations of Greater Manchester were built by people that went before him, including, by the way, me. You know, I was a council leader in 2014, and we signed the devolution deal that created the mayor with George Osborne. So we created the mayoralty.
It's all George Osborne's fault.
But well, quite interestingly, that there are I think some similarities here about how do you genuinely rebalance the country, because George Osborne was probably less about how do you level up socially, but he absolutely had an eye on how do you address this imbalance in the country where you have a tax and spend deficit that exists in large parts of the country outside of London and the South East. And so for Greater Manchester's point of view, we were spending more in public services and welfare than we were generating in tax. And our belief was that's because we had a Whitehall and Treasury that weren't willing to let go of the purse strings to really invest in our economy. And actually, if we don't invest in people and skills and education, and we don't build the houses that people need, we can't have a thriving economy that benefits the whole country. So I think Andy has taken that from Greater Manchester, but he also recognises that this is not even a North West story, let alone a Greater Manchester story. This is a story for the country. We're sat here in one of the most expensive parts of England in Westminster, but like I know, you walk 5 streets down the road and there's some of the poorest estates in the country. And so that disconnect from politics and, an opportunity is very real for many people in the country.
Does he not have to be careful, though, to maybe not play up the whole northern thing as much as he has? Because, there are a lot of people in Yorkshire won't even consider Andy Burnham represents them, even though you'd say they're both in the north. The sort of professional northerner thing. I don't know if you've seen Russell Kane's takeoff of him, but if that sort of catches a bit of a public wave, I think there's going to be an awful lot of people, not just in England, but in the rest of the United Kingdom, that are going to think, well, hang on a minute, mate, you're Prime Minister for the whole of the country, not just the Northwest.
Well, I think in there is a balance of, kind of brand and substance, isn't it? I think without doubt people who aren't part of Greater Manchester and the Northwest probably sees that kind of northern stamp as a brand. But for us, it's about substance. It's about what experience do you have that means that when you go into politics, you're going to change the system that's let our area down. And as I said, if you can sort out a town like Oldham, you can sort out any part of the country, because people are being left behind. And that's because decision makers are disconnected from the reality and the consequence of decisions that are being taken every single day by people who aren't affected by those decisions.
Just finally, if we look at some of the things he wants to do, there's going to be what Tony Blair called the forces of conservatism that will be there to block it. The civil service, I think, is one. But NIMBYs are another. If you want to build more houses, which the last Conservative government wanted to do, Keir Starmer wanted to do, but we know that they're way behind on their house building targets, mainly because people don't want new houses in their own backyards. And I think this is true of council estates as true as any other kind of housing. So if he really wants to have this massive council house building programme, how is he going to get the NIMBY interests off his back?
I think, first of all, the devolution challenge, because I was a minister that wrote the English Devolution Community Empowerment Act, as it is now, and the white paper that went before it. And the challenge for England is it's not one place, it's a collection of many diverse places with very different histories, very different relationships with their neighbours. And for some people, even the thought of having a mayor is something that they just don't get behind. Now, my view is, if you make the prize big enough, so investment and localised decisions and accountability, that people will go to a mayor because they understand the power of that role. If you starve it of resource and don't give it the power, then people, of course, question, well, what's the point in this additional tier of government? So it's got to be a genuine resetting of how the system works, and probably where devolution hasn't quite kind of got to the points to date, if we're honest, is that it's talked a lot about how you change local government. It talks a lot about our regions. It's never really addressed how you reform Whitehall. And that's the centre of the beast that you need to change.
Exactly. And that's the basis of the problem, isn't it? Because you'll never find a civil servant in Whitehall who's going to say, yes, I'd love to give you up all my power and devolve it to the regions, because it basically means I haven't got a job anymore.
No, I think they'll have a job, but the job might be somewhere else. I've worked with a lot of civil servants in government who've come from all corners of the country and who said they had to come to London for work because there's a civil service job at the level that they were working towards was not available in the northwest of England. Well, that's true of the east of England, it's true of the southwest of England, it's true of large parts of the country. So if you can deal with that, where actually you don't need to leave the town or city where you were raised to get on in life, then I think for most people that would be seen as a good thing. OK, Jim, thank you very much indeed. That's Jim McMahon, Labour MP for Oldham West, Chatterton and Royton. Right, over to you in a moment, 0345 6060 973. So are you feeling the Burnham vibes? Are you moderately excited by what might happen over the course of the next few weeks, few months, few years? Do you think his agenda, particularly this devolution agenda, is the right one? Is it right for him to want to give more powers to local councils and local mayors? But you worry about the whole thing, how the whole thing's going to be paid for. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 22 minutes past 7.
This is LBC.
Very, very big mess indeed. Now, the thing about Andy Burnham, when you contrast him with Keir Starmer, is that he certainly can talk the talk. Now, the jury is out on whether he can walk the walk. I think everyone will have their own views on that. Kemi Badenoch has been fairly hard-hitting in her criticism of him so far. She thinks he's clearly a little bit shallow, doesn't have the policies to back up the rhetoric. Now, time will tell about that. I don't know the answer to that question. That's why I think it would have been better. And if I hadn't been on holiday over the last 2 weeks, I think this would have been one of the things that I would have been putting to you. I think it would have been better if he took over as Prime Minister in September, giving him enough time to get his ducks in a row, to get his policies worked out, to decide exactly who he wanted to be in his government. And that's one of the weaknesses of our system. We don't have the American-style transition where a new president comes in and they have essentially 3 months to form their administrations. British prime ministers can sort of be out one day and then back in the next without having had really any time to prepare. Now, you can argue that, well, Andy Burnham's had plenty of time to prepare because clearly the decision to run against Keir Starmer was not taken lightly. It was not taken quickly. It's been developing over some time. And I don't think that he has really got his policy platform in place. But he needs to by the 20th of July, because that's the day that he will become Prime Minister, unless a challenger appears from nowhere. Al Khan still hasn't actually ruled himself out, but I really don't see that happening. So, what's your view? Let's go to the calls. Jane is in Bishop Stortford. Jane, hi.
Hello. This question about fiscal governance and how the money will be raised. Very crucial point, because not only do we need to ensure our debt to GDP never becomes adversely impacted. Keir Starmer, he did something quite useful in that we haven't lost our credit rating. We are still standing strong on that front. But the moment we devolve, and devolution has started in a very minuscule way, the boats crisis and sponsorship derivative, who can sponsor whom and for how much and for how long, whether that's just covering things up a bit, because really the essence of that question is still going to require a lot of understanding. But the crucial question about devolvement to all the boroughs and councils, and they do as they please, the impact of that, as we know, Manchester the total debt is 1.6 billion currently running. And that equates to something like £3,000 per citizen of Manchester. And similarly, we've got a problem all across the United Kingdom. That is the current status with 2.9 trillion in debt to the GDP. That is very serious. So how is he going to raise the money? I was doing a model, and I said, do you need 100 billion to start your journey? 100 billion, how do you do that? You'll raise taxes. You'll raise taxes all the way up to the highest of earners, starting from 70 to 80, 90,000 a year, all the way up, incremental rise. And that will possibly bring about a shed load up to 50 to 70 billion. But that will be short-lived, because that behavioural economics, of which we're all aware, people will flee as they have been. But this scenario seems to be the only opportunity that may ever be encountered because of AI coming on board. And jobs are few and far between with that scenario. And this growth that we're referring to, it might bring about quite a large chunk of growth. We're talking in the order of 300 to 400 billion. But that too would necessitate taxation, the AI robot taxation. And how do you derive the methodology for taxing robots?
Well, I mean, you're looking a little bit into the future here. I mean, I think you make a good point, though. I think the way that he can pay for any of the policies that he wants to introduce is not through raising taxes. And I think his choice of chancellor is going to be crucial here. If he picks somebody who the markets think that, well, all they're going to do is raise taxes, that will lose confidence in the British economy. The way to get more money in is to have economic growth. And if all of his economic policy is geared towards increasing economic growth, then great, we'll all be happy. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer talked the talk on that, but they didn't walk the walk. They kept introducing policies which are absolutely anti-growth.
Well, that's so true as well. But this point about introducing growth via AI, we are beholden to the AI titans, the oligarchs that they are also. And if you start to bring about this AI taxation, you may also lose their confidence to want to continue. And they are well within their remit to say, we don't really want to be with you because the economic marketplace is such that all of us here, and China's building their own AI models, as is India and Brazil. Russia has been doing it for a long time. All of these nations are...
Well, again, that is true, but we are in a far better position than most other countries. I mean, we come third in the international league table of AI developers after the US and China. The European Union is nowhere in this. And if you actually look at the amount of AI investment there is in this country compared to the whole of the European Union, we're doing rather well. So let's shout that from the rooftops a little bit. We are good at something. Jane, really good call. Thank you very much indeed. 0345 6060 973. We'll take more calls on Andy Burnham and what he said this morning in just a few moments' time. Also, we'll find out more about the US Supreme Court rejecting a request from Donald Trump to hear an appeal against a ruling that he defamed and sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll. 7:31 news headlines on LBC with Amelia Cox.
This is LBC.
The incident a hoax on social media. Well, David Smith is Washington Bureau Chief for The Guardian and joins me live from Washington, D.C. David, very good evening. How much of a blow is this to Donald Trump?
It's certainly a setback, and he lashed out when it happened. He called this a fake case and further evidence of the weaponization of lawfare and the Justice Department against him. In the scheme of things, he has a lot of legal actions. This case was already out there, of course, so I don't think it's going to particularly change his reputation from what people know already. There's not going to be some mass desertion of Trump voters because of this. But it is another data point that shows that sometimes the courts, even the Supreme Court, are willing to defy him. And in terms of the way history will regard him, this case accusing him of sexual abuse and defamation will stand.
So he now has to hand over the money, presumably.
Presumably, yes. And if there's one thing Trump is adept at, it's delaying tactics and just trying to throw sand in the gears and put off these verdicts. But I don't see really what recourse he has now. If the Supreme Court won't take it up, then in theory, yes, he does have to pay up. Of course, $5 million, not a huge amount of money for him, but it will be a bitter pill to swallow. Then, of course, there is a separate case that he's also appealing, again, with E. Jean Carroll for defamation. That one was more than $80 million, so I suspect he takes that one more seriously.
How is he doing in the polls at the moment? I mean, how popular is he or unpopular is he compared to other presidents?
Very badly. I mean, depending how you measure it and who you talk to, he's the most unpopular president of all time at this stage, or certainly thereabouts. I think there's really been a series of blows around the Iran war, as he promised not to take America into foreign conflicts. Inflation is a problem after he promised to lower prices. And I know just anecdotally, when I travel around the country and I talk to Trump voters, you do hear them say, we loved his first term. That was great for us. Second time around, don't know why he's got distracted by foreign policy and these things. We're not into it so much. All of that said, there is that hardcore of Trump support that always keeps him in the 30s percentage-wise, maybe even up to 40%. They do seem immovable. And of course, as far as Trump is concerned, he's not running again for president, as far as we know. So perhaps he doesn't actually care that much.
David, thank you. That's David Smith, Washington Bureau Chief for The Guardian. Right, back to your calls on Andy Burnham and his speech this morning that he made in Manchester. Holly's in Streatham. Hi, Holly.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I just wanted to say that I was impressed, very impressed with Burnham's speech. There was a lack of content in terms of how he's going to make the vision come alive, but I thought the vision was different. It didn't feel like words coming from a politician's mouth. In particular, the devolution. I'm originally from Northumberland. And like most other people from my area, I loved it. I still love it, but I then had to move away for work because the career opportunities just aren't the same in the north as they are in London. I thought the other key thing that really felt sort of goosebump territory for me was that the whole speech, there wasn't one iota of the Tories did this, my predecessor did that, we failed you in this, we failed you in that. There was a admission of there is a problem, we are a country in conflict with each other, but this is the vision, this is the hope, this is what we can do to get us back to where we deserve to be. And it was kind of a replica of his election in Makerfield, in that you didn't really need to belittle opponents or play those silly games that turned the majority of the country off politics in the first place, which then means that people who perhaps don't deserve our vote get it and can do things without the scrutinisation because we lump them all in one boat. So I was really impressed.
Come on to the scrutiny in a moment, but I too picked up on that part of the speech. And it reminded me of a speech that David Cameron made before he became Prime Minister, where he promised to be sort of not a politician who would sort of harangue his opponents over the dispatch box. He basically said, well, they're all good people, we just have different ways of going about things. But when he became Prime Minister, you get into PMQs, and I mean, he lapsed into exactly the same kind of Yabu sucks politics that all of his predecessors had done. Do you not feel that Andy Burnham is almost inevitably going to do that?
I don't think he will necessarily, because of how much emphasis he's put on devolution. You know, if we've had so many passing prime ministers, so many failures from all sides of the political spectrum, then there has to be a fault with the system in general. And if he is going to provide change in terms of the whips, in terms of devolution, meaningful change in devolution, then that system is changed. And then that would therefore give him, or who comes after him, potentially that room to actually do what I think most politicians want to do, but then feel that they can't. And it is at a time where, as I say, I feel like we are, as a nation, in conflict with each other.
Yeah.
You know, if you're from Liverpool and you're all from Manchester or Newcastle, we all have different ways of seeing each other. If somebody from Newcastle wouldn't necessarily think that somebody from Manchester is northern, and the same from people that London. And there's lots of tribalism, and that is part of our character. But tribalism now to a point where we're losing the things that would thread us and bind us together as a nation. We're losing it to rhetoric of hate and division, and kind of always thinking that the glass is half empty. Now, obviously, you have to actually put into practice the speeches and the hope, and you have to produce, you know, the policies that will bring about the change. But for somebody to go, well, hang on a minute, if we change the system to allow us to do what we've always wanted to do to that extent, I mean, I'm relatively young, but I don't think I've heard that from somebody who probably is actually going to get the top job. I haven't heard anybody say that with such conviction and strength and an aura of power. You know, you hear him, it feels like he's got the power to actually do it.
Holly, you have an aura of power, because the moment you mentioned Newcastle, Kevin from Newcastle came up on my switchboard. You obviously transmitted the northeastern vibes to Kevin, but those disappeared now.
You can't get rid of us. That's what it is.
Just before I let you go, you mentioned the word scrutiny early on in the conversation. What did you make of the fact that he didn't take any questions after the speech?
I thought that it was a clever move. I think, you know, a lot of the press and the media and ordinary people, because we're in this mindset of self-destruct and tearing each other apart, it would be natural to go to, well, how are you going to pay for this and what are you going to do for that?
Well, those are relevant questions.
They are relevant questions, but they're relevant questions once he's got his cabinet in place and we actually hear, okay, this is my cabinet, I am now officially the Prime Minister, so this is how I'm going to bring that vision into practice. If he is coming in today to specifically say, this is how I feel, this is my experience, this is what I think will change it, to not invite question after doesn't necessarily feel like avoiding scrutiny. It feels like setting out the stall to then hopefully elaborate further. If he then doesn't provide any scrutiny, if he doesn't give actual genuine policies once a cabinet is in place, well then yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed, Holly. Great call. I must admit, I did laugh this afternoon when I read Alistair Campbell say, oh no, it's a masterstroke not to take questions. And I'm thinking, you never said that when Boris Johnson didn't, did you? Or when Rishi Sunak didn't. How times change. Paul in Cardiff says devolution can be good, but with power comes responsibility. The difficulty with devolution is finding local politicians competent enough to deal with the responsibility. Welsh devolution is the example of how not to do it. We have a generation of politicians who have no concept of managing the income side of government finances. The only thing they know how to do is pour more and more money down the NHS black hole. To work, devolved politicians must take responsibility for their income. Less central taxes. I think you mean fewer. Fewer central taxes, more local taxes, local borrowing, etc., and less blaming Westminster. Right, let's go to Val, who's in Bracknell. Hello, Val.
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
I hate to be this guy, but I think Andy Burnham is least trust of the Labours. Okay.
He's what?
So far, I heard only very nice words, but the market does not work this way. I mean, I wish we can hug each other, sing kumbaya, but the markets will give him about 2 to 3 weeks, and then it will happen. And personally, I'm preparing to buy a cabbage and start counting when is the cabbage will be.
You're comparing Andy Burnham to the Trussette.
Yes, I'm preparing Andy Burnham Trussette now. I mean, I wish everything could be good if we are all friends and we help each other, but that's not how the market works, okay? And so far, I'm very, very skeptical.
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with being skeptical. I too am skeptical. I want to believe the hype. I want to believe the vibes. But I want to see, in the end, where is the real thought behind the policy? Where is the research behind the policy? You can't just promise more and more and more. And there was a lot in this. I mean, there was no specific saying, oh, we're going to spend 5 billion on this, we're going to spend 10 billion on that. There was a lot of aspiration. There is nothing wrong with aspiration, it has to be said. But in the end, the pigeons come home to roost, don't they? When the coffers are empty, that's when we have to sort of say, well, hang on a minute. You promised us all of these wonderful things. You spent all this money. Where are the results? And I'm afraid that often when politicians make speeches like Andy Burnham did at lunchtime, it in the end, we'll look back in 3 or 4 years' time and think, well, it was just vacuous. There was nothing there. There was nothing of substance. Thank you very much, Val. Rose says, this is why I love LBC. We have such intelligent, sensible listeners. Thanks, Holly. Well, I think all the callers we've had on so far this hour have made some absolutely brilliant points. And we'll get some more in just a few moments' time. But let me tell you who's on Cross Question at 8. We have Ben Bradley, former Conservative MP, now Reform UK's Head of Local Government Delivery. Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow. Kirsty Blackman, SNP MP for Aberdeen North. And Tom Scottson, political correspondent for The Sun. So they'll be here after 8 taking your questions. I'm sure there'll be a couple on Andy Burnham's speech and possibly other things related to the current political situation, but feel free to ask anything you like. It's 7:45 on LBC.
This is LBC.
Question. What was that? What did Andy Burnham's father do? I don't know that.
I don't know. But
we're going to do an instant chat GPT here and find out what Andy Burnham's father did for a living, because I'm sure we'll be told it repetitively. Anyway, carry on. Telephone engineer for BT is the answer.
Oh, wow. Okay, brilliant. There we go. Is that working class?
I think it is, yes.
Okay. So, I was impressed with his speech. I did actually vote Labour in the last election, the general election, sorry. But I was very, very unimpressed once they started talking about, picking on the disabled and picking on the pensioners. It's just like, no, this is not the Labour Party I voted for. But Andy Burnham, his speech is actually a speech from a Labour leader that you'd actually want to hear if you want to. If you have those kind of values, and I thought that was really good. But there are two things that he said in the past that I'm a bit concerned about. I don't know whether he's pursuing them or not. I don't know. He obviously not at the moment because he hasn't got a mandate. But one of them is that he wants to get potentially maybe get a bit closer to the European Union, but as a staunch Brexiteer, I wouldn't agree with that. But the other thing...
Well, how is that different to Keir Starmer? That's what he's been trying to do.
Well, it isn't. That's what I'm saying. That's not the main point. The main point is the next one, which he also said a few years ago, I believe. He believes that we should have a written constitution. I'm vehemently opposed to that. I think there's a complete retrograde step because our constitution, obviously he's not going to be doing this term, obviously because they haven't gotten a mandate for that. So I accept that. But I would consider voting for him next time, but not if he brings that kind of stuff up. Because, a written constitution is set in the past by definition. It's like the American Constitution, and we know all the kind of problems that happen from those kind of constitutions, such as their gun laws and all that. They're set in the 1700s or whatever. It's just absurd. An unwritten constitution is a living, breathing entity. It develops. It's like an organism almost. It develops. It's not set in stone from the past. And so I really don't agree with a...
Okay. All right, John. Thank you very much. Anastasia says, there's a difference between a black and blue T-shirt. Yep. I wonder what Andy Burnham will do for people with disabilities and the cuts to welfare. I hope that the vulnerable will be left alone. Well, there haven't been any cuts to welfare. You look at the welfare budget and it is rising massively every single year. So can we get rid of this idea that governments have cut the welfare budget? They haven't. And the Conservatives didn't cut the welfare budget. They kept making rhetoric about doing so, but never actually did. Nathaniel is in Dover. Hi, Nathaniel.
Ian, how's it going?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I've been in with bated breath about what's going to become of Andy Burnham, and I'm a saddo. Last week, I sort of wrote down to myself in my head the sort of things I'd like to see him. And you know what? There were some refreshing bits, but he mentioned that hasn't really been picked up on, which really caught my eye. So, but since Starmer, the problem with Starmer is he's always got elected on the back of "I'm not Rishi Sunak." That was his mandate, and it's a useless mandate. Let's be honest, because that very quickly waned. I really liked about Andy Burnham's speech. Once was immigration ever used as a point to blame, a point of reason? Really changes the tone of the conversation, which was nice because we've been obsessed with immigration as a country, rightly or wrongly, for a long, long time, which gives air to some very unsavoury ways to do things like Shabana Mahmood has done.
Yes, it might do, but if you don't talk about it, that is actually worse. I think. I don't think it's a subject that any politician, whether they're prime minister or not, can avoid talking about and can avoid addressing, given it is one of the top three concerns of the British people.
No, of course, but what I think was clever about the framing was he mentioned about industrialising British manufacturing without that alongside immigration, he changed the conversation around putting British industries first, putting young people first who are in the UK without mentioning immigration. So he's mentioning it without going straight to the boats, the gangs, that sort of thing. And it's nice to hear a speech for once which doesn't jump straight into that.
No,
now,
sure.
I thought that was quite nice.
Sure, and look, as somebody says here on a text, he was talking for 30 minutes. I don't know how you're going to get the detail you want in such a small amount of time. Come on, says a texter here. So, I mean, I do get that. I mean, you can't give every detail in one speech. Thank you very much. Jake says he was, we've already done that. This is from Jake. Right, let's go to John in Stoke-on-Trent. Hi, John.
Hello. Okay.
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, I think the Scottish Parliament is a waste of time, and I think the Welsh, they're just glorified token shops. They all have gold-plated pensions and state funerals and all sorts.
What do you mean? Well, they don't have state funerals. I mean, that's
they do.
No, they don't.
Donald Joe did, and what's the other one? The SNP leader.
Well,
in Scotland.
I don't think there were state funerals, but I mean,
But anyway, so my idea is have your MPs, your normal MPs, and have January, February, they stop in their regions. So the North West MPs stick together, the Scottish ones, the Northern Irish ones, the Welsh ones, and the Cornish ones, and the London ones, and the Midland ones. And then from March, April, May, June, July, they all go to Westminster. And then after that, they have the summer break, they have the conferences in September, and then they have 2 months before Christmas. That way you do away with a lot of bureaucracy.
Well, I've never been a fan of more politicians, but I think it's quite difficult to take away a parliament from Scotland and Wales when they've now had one for 26 years. I mean, that's certainly Andy Burnham's not going to do that. Not the Conservative Party in Reform, they're not proposing anything like that. So I don't really think that's going to happen, John. But thank you very much. SB says, I'm very excited about Andy Burnham, and it will probably mean that people like you will need to pay a little bit more tax. And I don't want to hear a word of complaint about it. It's a privilege to pay tax. Oh my God. It's a privilege to pay tax as someone with broad shoulders. I make no complaint about paying tax. But there does come a point when you think, what is the point of working extra hours if you're going to be giving the majority of it to the Treasury, to the Chancellor? We have got the highest tax burden in this country at any time since the Second World War. And you're seriously suggesting that tax burden should increase? No, it shouldn't. It should be cut. Because if you cut taxes, cut regulation, you get economic growth. You don't have to be an economic expert to know that. Thank you very much. Let's go to Ashley, who is in Burgess Hill. Ashley, hi.
Ian, hi. Yeah, I'll make this brief, but hey, listen, the last thing we want is for central government to start giving more power and more money to our local councils. I live in Burgess Hill, and they have categorically wrecked this town. I don't know where they spend the money that they get, and the last thing I'd like to do is furnish them with more money. I mean, literally, I can only speak as a friend, but I find that there's just so much corruption in this whole country, within politics and within everything.
Well, hang on a second. Hang on. Just because you've got a terrible local council, that doesn't automatically mean that they're corrupt.
I didn't say that, but I'm just saying.
Well, you were implying it.
Well, I'm allowed to have an opinion. That's what this.
Yeah,
you're
allowed to have. You are allowed to have an opinion, but just because a council is bad at what it does not automatically imply that they're corrupt.
I just said to you what I would fear is giving local councils and local government more money to do with what they want with. I fear that money wouldn't be spent in the proper place, quite frankly, and I think it's a very bad idea. And this Andy Burnham fella, I wouldn't give it up for him, quite frankly. He turns up. He's badging his way into the position that he's now in, and it's all the hoodwink inside central government. And it should have gone to the electorate. We should have chosen who's our prime minister is. because we elected the Labour government based upon our Prime Minister, who was the head of the Labour Party at the time.
Well, we're not a presidential system; we're a parliamentary democracy.
I appreciate that.
So, I mean, that having said that, though. There does seem to be a lot of people who think now that he will call an election before the end of the year. And personally, I think he'd be absolutely mad to do so. But I mean, he's got a majority of 170 or something like that. He's got 400 MPs. Why on earth would you give that up? Because inevitably, they wouldn't get that kind of majority at a new election.
You're probably right, Ian, but I think if he wants to win hearts and minds of the nation, then I think he'd be very brave, and I think I would respect him massively if he were to call a general election, because quite frankly, I don't see there's any other party at the moment that's capable of running this country. He would probably still get a majority vote, and they'd probably still be re-elected based upon, I think, all the other parties are scratching around.
You never know. We might find out very soon. Thank you for your call, Ashley, and thank you to all of you that have called in this hour. Some really good calls there. Coming up now, it is Monday's Cross Question. We'll be joined in the studio by Ben Bradley, Reform UK's Head of Local Government Delivery, former Conservative MP and County Council leader. Stella Creasy is Labour MP for Walthamstow, Kirsty Blackman, SNP MP for Aberdeen North, and Tom Scottson, political correspondent for The Sun. The number to call 0345 6060973. You can WhatsApp on that number, you can text on 84850, and of course you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Andy Burnham has promised to get Britain out of a rut if he becomes the next Prime Minister. The Makerfield MP has confirmed he will move some Number 10 operations from London to Manchester if he takes over.
It will only be based here. The job of Number 10 North will be to make power flow into the Midlands, into the southwest, into the east of England, as much as into the northeast. Number 10 North will be the nerve centre of a rewired Britain.
In his first speech since returning to Westminster, he promised to give regions the ability to take control of matters such as transport and housing. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch says that will lead to more taxes and regulations. Labour's Jim McMahon, a former local government minister under Sir Keir Starmer, told Ian it's unfair to suggest Mr Burnham lacks experience.
In the mayoral context, his cabinet, if you like, his lead members are made up of council leaders who he doesn't get to choose. But he has to find a way of working with those different interests to try and bring people together around a common vision. And what we've done in Greater Manchester around transport, around housing, around the skills agenda and good jobs. Actually the social progress that's being made on skills for working class kids is a bit of an untold story.
Resident doctors in England have voted to accept a fresh government offer on pay and conditions. The British Medical Association says just over half of members backed the deal on a 57% turnout. It ends years of strike action that's caused huge disruption in the NHS. Health Secretary James Murray says it's a welcome development.
The cost of the offer on the table is less than the cost of another week of strikes, so it's good value for money for taxpayers, as well as being good news for NHS staff and, crucially, for patients.
The US Supreme Court has rejected Donald Trump's appeal after he was found liable for sexually abusing a woman in a civil case. The president was told to pay E. Jean Carroll $5 million in damages in 2023. He denies assaulting her. A close aide to former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has admitted gambling on the date of the 2024 general election. Ex-Tory MP Craig Williams used confidential information to place bets on the timing of the poll. And British number 1 Cameron Norrie is out of Wimbledon after losing to world number 144 Michael Zeng in the first round. He went down in 5 sets. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 23 points at 10,484. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.15. LBC weather, wet and windy for Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. A little patchy rain elsewhere, lows of 11 to 17. Rain in the north and west tomorrow, and also in the southeast of England for a time. Brighter elsewhere, highs of 15 to 23 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening to you. Welcome to Monday's Cross Question. I gather while I was away, there was a bit of a stooshy on the Brexit Cross Question. It's probably just as well I wasn't there. I might have had to take a side. But tonight, on the panel with me, we have to my left, Kirsty Blackman, SNP MP for Aberdeen North. Next to her is Ben Bradley, Reform UK's Head of Local Government Delivery, of course, a former Conservative MP and County Council leader. To my right, Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow. And to her right, Tom Scottson, or what should we say, Stom Totson, I think that's, we'll rename you, political correspondent for The Sun. They are here to answer your questions. 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp your question on that number, but we prefer you to call, or you can text 84850. And of course, you can watch our proceedings live on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's go to our first question. It's a question from Andrew on a text. Today, Andy Burnham said he needs 10 years to deliver his economic plan that he set out for Britain. If he becomes PM, should he now go to the country to get a proper mandate for his plan? And bearing in mind that the media today were not allowed to ask any questions about this new plan, what one question would each of the panel have asked Burnham had they been allowed to? Now, I like that question. That's a good one, isn't it? Tom Scottson, let's start with you.
So the question that I did want to ask, because I attended the conference today but got barred from asking a question.
You're a Manc, aren't you?
I am a Manc, yes. I am just from Altrincham, so just in
the posh bit. The posh bit,
yeah. Don't sound it, but yes, I am. The question that I really wanted to ask Iain was, who's going to be his Chancellor? And I think that is going to be the crucial element, because that is going to determine the direction of the government. Is it going to commit to net zero, which many of the unions don't want, many of its MPs actually don't want, many of the voters don't want? Or is he going to commit to someone maybe a bit more of a moderate Chancellor, a Wes Streeting, a Shabana Mahmood, who's probably going to fall in line to the Labour manifesto? So that's the sort of thing that I'd have liked to ask.
But why? Let me ask you a follow-up on that question. Why would you ask a question that you know you're not going to get an answer to?
Because I think that the public need to know and need to see that someone is pressing them about who is going to be probably the most important position within the government. I think that the Chancellor, particularly in someone like Burnham and how much it's been speculated, is going to set the direction of the country. And as someone like Burnham who wants 10 years in power, that's going to be at least 2 general elections. That's not going to just determine the next couple of years. That could determine the next generation. And I would, of course, have liked to have asked that. But do I think he should go to the country? Well, do turkeys vote for Christmas? Is he going to give away that huge majority that many of his MPs who sit on wafer-thin majorities want to give up? Probably not. But if he wants this radical manifesto, which will include huge tax and spending, more regulation perhaps, and of course constitutional change with more devolution across the country, then I think he's got to.
Stella, you're gagging to get into this, I can tell.
I just think, as a former Manc myself, but I was in the proper part of Manchester, Didsbury. I mean, he did literally say that was the one question he wasn't going to answer, because he actually wanted the speech to stand on its own rather than people get bogged down again into the kind of Westminster bubble about who does what role. Partly because I think it is fair to say at the moment we don't look like a party that's on the same page in the same team. And one of the things that Andy Burnham is talking about doing is, how do you make that happen? You do that around a shared set of values and a shared set of priorities. I think in fairness to him, setting those out is the first way that you get a sense of where he would want to take things and the kind of team he would want to lead. I understand your point about being interested. I take a different view on net zero, having been working with 1,000 local residents in Walthamstow who totally get, in a world where energy prices are absolutely driving the cost of living crisis, driving a sense of uncertainty and fear, the more you can do to transition to clean energy, the more you can get cheaper bills. I think having a government that understands that and brings some of those concerns together would be a good thing.
So Ed Miliband for Chancellor then?
I want to see the speech and what it stands for. I thought, you asked me about the question. Surely that's your first place. What would you've asked? And I actually think it's a more reflective question I've been thinking about a lot, is that how can we show people that they can enjoy life with their families? Because I think the one thing that is missing at the moment from all our political discussions right now is the meaning of life, right? It's what does it matter? It's to be able to spend
20 quid to go to Alton Towers. That's what Rachel Reeves.
We can probably decide that in the next 5 minutes.
Absolutely isn't enough. right? Because if you've got families who've got too much month at the end of their money because they're terrified about what their energy bills are, what the mortgages are going to be, what they're going to be able to do with the kids or not be able to do with the kids over the summer, having a government that gets that. We've just been through a heat wave where thousands of schools were closed, millions of pounds were lost from the economy because people had to go home and look after their kids and nurseries were shut. And we haven't had that conversation. And that speaks to a broader question for me. You joke about the meaning of life, but actually that, like, at the end of the day, what matters to you? It's your family, it's your home, it's your mates, it's being able to live a quality of life that people don't feel they've got right now because money is tight. That I think it's really important that you have a government that understands why that matters to people as well.
And I totally agree with you. But
there you go. You see, you were laughing before, but now you understand.
The problem is, though, that if you come out with, I mean, look, politics has got to be partly about aspiration. You say what you want to do, even if in the back of your mind you think, well, this is going to be a pretty tough challenge to achieve this. But if you don't achieve it, then at the end of it, you get this sense of letdown, and it enhances this idea that no government, doesn't matter what the party, no government can actually deliver on what they
and I think that's a very real concern for all of us. I mean, one of the things that I also think we've got to understand is how change actually happens. And the honest truth is the way in which we run government in this country doesn't work. It tends to rely too much on a strong character. So when Andy starts talking, A, about tackling the culture of politics, and B, about actually how do you engage the public in the decisions, in the conversations you want to have at a much more localised level, that speaks to me a lot, because having watched over 16 years governments try from the centre to achieve radical change of all colours and fail, I think that's the right place to start the conversation.
Kirsty Blackman, have you got any Mancunian roots that you can compete with these two on?
I've been there once. It was really nice. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time in an escape room.
Was this pre-Burnham or anti? In an escape room?
Yeah. Have you not been to an escape room?
No.
You do all these puzzles.
I'd really
to
like
try
to
and
see
get
Iain in
out.
an escape room. That would be
absolutely.
They're really brilliant.
Make it happen.
So me and my friends go away sometimes, and when we go away, we always go somewhere with an escape room, so that we can try and escape from a room.
I'll leave our listeners to interpret that for themselves. Right, the question, should there be a general election, and what one question would you have liked to ask Andy Burnham?
I mean, in terms of Labour's manifesto for the 2024 election, it was basically, we're not the Tories, vote for us. And Andy Burnham is still not the Tories. So I can kind of see that he could make the argument that they are still delivering the manifesto. I get that. In terms of the one question, he stood up there today and spoke about devolution all of the time. Our one key ask for Andy Burnham is give us control over energy policy. Give us control over energy policy so we can make sure that people's bills are cheaper, and so that we can make sure that we get enough oil and gas out of the North Sea to sustain the jobs that we need before we get more jobs in renewables. So it's not really a question, it's an ask though. Just give us that.
Ben?
Well, the question is how, right? Because everybody said the same stuff for the last 7 prime ministers in a row. We're going to build more houses. We're going to pass more power down through devolution. Everybody said that. Rishi Sunak said that. Keir Starmer said that. Nobody's done it because actually it's not that simple, is it? So what does he know that the last 7 prime ministers haven't known about how to actually get this stuff through the system?
But Reform are promising all of that as
well. Reform are the only party who are actually talking about how you unpick the system of governance in Whitehall and you do something fundamentally differently. You look at the work that Danny Kruger's come out with recently.
That's what Burnham's talked about this morning.
Well, he's not. He's talked about some arbitrary office in the north of England. I tell you now, the Treasury in Darlington has not changed the fundamental DNA of central government, has it? And he's talked about continuation in terms of we want to build more homes and we want to devolve more powers of the last several governments' agendas and manifestos, with the exception of Keir Starmer, because as Kirsty said, he didn't actually promise anything other than to be different from the guys who were there last week. So from that point of view, fine, sounds nice. He's clearly more charming and whatever than Keir Starmer is, but he's not actually saying anything different to what anybody said for the last 30 years. So I don't buy it. I don't think the public will buy it. And the fact that, speaking of somebody who negotiated a devolution deal and stood for regional mayor, right? I understand the opportunity of devolution and the economy and the growth that it can drive, but the idea that really dry, arbitrary structural change is the thing that's going to kind of set the country on fire with excitement about a premiership is nuts. So I don't get it. I was a perfectly nice guy. I played football with Andy Burnham. We had a lovely time. It was very nice. I don't want him running the country.
It's a bit of a dirty player, though, isn't he?
Well, so I'm told, yeah. So I'm playing goals. We didn't get close to him. Keir Starmer in jeans, right? I don't think he's going to change anything fundamentally at all.
What one question would you like to ask?
I'd ask him how. As I say, you go back to all these commitments, they are the same commitments, fundamentally, that Rishi made, that Boris made, that Theresa May made. We will build more homes, we will pass more power down. Everyone since George Osborne and David Cameron has made those same commitments. Nobody's done it. So what's different about you?
And I suppose the other point here is that when you said, well, I want a new kind of politics, more consensual, and I'm thinking, yeah, David Cameron used to say that back when he was leader of the opposition. And then as soon as he got into power, it was PMQs, same old, same old. I mean, you've been around long enough, Stella, to see
I'm
this,
long in the
haven't you?
tooth, yes. I'm also long in the tooth not to take lectures about whether or not anything can be different from a political movement that claimed it was going to cut council tax and now is putting it up in councils like Kent. So I think
Lower
some
council tax than
humility,
any other party anywhere in the country.
about actually how you make change happen. And I think the thing that Andy Burnham does have is the experience of running the Greater Manchester region and some of those questions and tensions about where you make decisions locally, nationally, how you get people on board, how you actually get people in the room together. I think we would all agree that the way we do government doesn't work at the moment.
Okay, you may have
learning how you actually make change happen is a different thing.
You may have originated in Manchester, but you're now a southerner.
Well, actually, I tell you the story. You'll love this because we moved from Didsbury to Colchester. I called somebody a Wally in the playground and got out of me. So I shan't say that word before the watershed.
No, please don't.
But I lost my accent as a survival measure. So absolutely. And I've lived in Walthamstow for 30 years
That's
now.
us Essex boys for you.
Well, indeed. Colchester, but not your part of town.
I'm from the posh bit. But aren't you a bit sick, though, the professional northerner shtick? And that's not going to really go down well, is it, in a lot of areas?
Come on. I mean, part of the problem with this country, isn't it, at the moment, is this idea that somebody has to suffer for you to do well. So it's always got to be about us versus them. What I like about what Andy is saying is my socialism has always been rooted in the idea that nobody else should suffer for me to thrive and vice versa. There's talent and potential around this country. We haven't eked it out of people. There's barriers to achieving that with their financial, social, regional. Working in a way, actually, what I thought was quite clever about today is he is appealing across the country. So this idea that he only cares about the north isn't true. When he makes an argument, if kids in Manchester fail, people in London pay the price for it, we can all get behind that.
But it doesn't work. His record in Greater Manchester is having the highest increases in taxes of any mayor around the country to fund a nationalised bus service that has a £250 million taxpayers' annual subsidy and has declining ridership off the back of it. The system he has created is not this kind of wonderful
We've got a bit of mayor envy, Ben. I mean, it's one of the most successful parts of the country. It's growing faster than everywhere else. They've been able to bring, and what's interesting for all of us, isn't it? So I'm Labour and Co-op, like Andy is, right? So he's brought the business sector into the conversation.
Well, that guarantees you a job then, doesn't it?
Don't worry. Never worry. I mean, the one thing we can all agree on is that's never going to happen. But the idea that actually it's not about good or bad, it's about the purpose. And I just thought today was really interesting. I want to go back to this question about the culture in politics, because the other thing I want to be clear about is I don't think...
Well, don't do that because
the culture's very toxic.
Our next question kind of goes into that, so we'll leave that hanging. You're listening to LBC. It's Cross Question. It's 16 minutes past 8.
LBC.
Outshine the negativity from Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage.
How do you think that they're being negative?
I think whenever I hear it, they just tell you life's bad enough without politicians telling you how bad everything is. I think people, they want a bit of hope. So when you hear them acting childish in the Prime Minister's questions and they tell you how awful everything is, people know what the problem is. People know that the cost of living is what's crippling the average working man and woman.
But do you not think it's for the leader of the opposition and the leader of other opposition parties to point that out, to hold the government to account? And yes, of course, that's being negative, but if they weren't doing it, they wouldn't be doing their jobs.
Well, instead of just whinging all the time, come up with good ideas. You don't have to be negative all the time. People don't want to see negativity all the time. Come up with great ideas and tell us what your great ideas are, rather than tell us what the other side are doing wrong.
All right, Ben Bradley.
Well, that's precisely what Reform are doing. I think when you look back over the last 12 months, we've had almost a weekly press conference laying out an agenda, policy decisions on everything from litter picking in local councils right through to tax policy with Robert Jenrick. We're trying to lay out that alternative vision for the country. But I don't think that, it's probably a timely argument, isn't it? People argue that politicians create negativity and divide. Politicians reflect the people that they represent. They reflect.
But your party does keep saying that Britain is broken.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that it is, and I think that's what people broadly feel when you think that the average person I would talk to on the street in my former constituency or in the town where I live would tell you that nothing works. Would tell you that a lot of our public services are not value for money, do not deliver the things that people expect. You get to the point where even the basic things that they expect to be done, have your bins collected regularly, get your roads resurfaced effectively, do not happen and do not happen effectively. So it's no surprise that people feel when they're paying more and more and more for services that continue to appear to not work and not improve, that politicians who meet those people in their surgeries every week come to Parliament and say, you know what, this stuff is not good enough. And Andy Burnham, inevitably will get a bounce in the polls, inevitably will have a period where people go, oh, you know what, I like the sound of this guy, and he says it in a slightly more jaunty northern accent than the last guy who was a bit dull, so great, let's give him an opportunity. He's obviously timed it well because he's not going to get asked any actual serious questions until about October, because he'll become Prime Minister at the end of the session, go all the way through the recess on his tour of the country, no doubt, selling his vision, and it'll be after party conferences by the time any politicians get to ask him any serious questions. But actually, as I've said earlier on, I don't see that he has or knows or has said anything different to what the last 20 years of Prime Ministers have said. So he's got a hell of a way to go to convince me that that initial bounce is going to lead to any actual change at all.
Kirsty.
I mean, I did think his speech today was different. I did think it was different from speeches that we've heard across the last 20 years, particularly speeches that we've heard recently. If you listen to the Labour Party speaking in the chamber of the House of Commons, almost every single speech is an attack on reform or an attack on the Tories. It's, no matter what is being talked about, they'll say, oh, and some reform councillor did this. And it felt to me like Andy Burnham's speech today tried very hard not to do that and tried to stay away from that, which I thought was interesting. But given that he was talking about, working on a cross-party basis and thinking about, like, if we talk about social care, right, we need to work on social care on a cross-party basis. There's no way to
Which, to be fair to him, he did do when he was Secretary of State for Health.
But the fact that he was saying that, but also he wasn't just saying that and standing up and criticising reform and criticising the Tories. He was saying, I want to work on a cross-party basis, and wasn't criticising the other parties' policies. I thought that was really interesting. So I thought the tone was really different. And certainly, when I approach elections, if I'm, for some reason, I end up doing things like designing leaflets for elections quite a lot. And you think about actually, what way do you want to do this campaign? Do you want to do it in a totally positive way, or do you want to do it in a more negative way where you're attacking your opponents? My natural reaction is to do it in a more positive way, is to try and talk about the good things that we're promising, because I think that kind of hope brings people with you. It's very easy.
How did that work in the Aberdeen South by-election recently?
I didn't design the leaflets for that one. Do you know what, Iain? We lost fair and square because the Tories absolutely put oil and gas front and centre of everything that was on every single leaflet, and the leaflets didn't mention anything other than oil and gas. And it was, do you think the oil and gas industry is struggling? If so, vote Tory. Right? And people voted Tory on that basis. And, that's why when I hear about Ed Miliband being Chancellor, I'm absolutely terrified to tell you that would be the end of Labour in Aberdeen forever.
Most of the rest of the country as well, I think.
He is, if you ask taxi drivers in Aberdeen, he is the most hated and disliked politician in the city.
I remember 2 years ago, I did Question Time when it was in Aberdeen, and I always asked the taxi drivers about sort of local issues. And I said to the taxi driver on the way there, I said, how do you think Aberdeen will do if Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister? I can't repeat exactly what he said, but it was along the basis of we're effed.
Yeah. And, that has been the case. Things weren't great under the Tories. We had the extra tax put on the oil and gas industry. But now, with that tax being extended, and also decisions not being made around oil and gas fields, that's a really big problem. We're losing 1,000 jobs a month in the oil and gas industry. It's massive. We need to fix this.
Tom?
I think in the short term, it's definitely going to make a difference. And we probably saw this with Boris Johnson when he came in. He was more hopeful, asking for more funding for police, schools and education. I think this, with Andy Burnham, kind of echoed that. But I think in the long term, and I think this is the huge problem, is that kind of optimism isn't going to solve the crises in defence, in the economy, for energy, education. Obviously, we've seen now wars on many fronts, not just on the continent, but of course the Middle East. The Iran crisis seems to be continuing for every day now. And my probably big concern with Burnham is, and I think this is also his greatest strength but weakness, is he is a very personable person. I think any MP, Labour activist that you speak to, they always say he can remember your name. He's very good at conversation. He's always good at finding common ground. But I feel a big part of the art of politics is the ability to say no. And depending on even the emotional causes of whether it's legislation or whether it's money, and I feel the problem with someone like Burnham is if he is this personable and empathetic person, is he going to find it very hard to say no to extra spending when he comes into number 10. I think this is going to be a huge problem. And come the next election, okay, he might have this mini bounce, but in the end, we saw what happened with Gordon Brown. He had a bit of a bounce and then lost the election.
Stella, that's a good point that Tom makes, isn't it, about politicians do have to say no. You can't be popular all the time. You can't please everyone all of the time. And I get the impression that Andy Burnham is a bit of a people pleaser. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, actually, because I think we all are to an extent.
Very much so.
But it can be a weakness in a Prime Minister.
Let's try and chart a course between everything everyone's saying, because there's a role for scrutiny, right? There's a role for different ideas. There is an honourable disagreement. It'd be weird if we all agreed all the time. So you do want disagreement. You do want disagreement from a perspective, well, what would you do instead? And that comes across in all these conversations. Because it helps you work through whether you're on the right path or actually whether there's something you've been missing. Some of the best things I've been involved in, like capping payday loans, came from talking to people on different political perspectives who helped me get to the right place on it. Do I think that Andy Burnham has that sense about where he wants to take things? Yes, I genuinely thought today was really interesting about a sense of like, how would you make things happen? You are also right, Tom, that, it's fair to say in 2024, did anybody have on their bingo card President Trump starting a war with Iran, getting elected a second time, using trade as a national security measure? Did we have what's happening in Ukraine? Did we have what's happening in the Middle East? So the world is a very unstable place, which can limit your horizons for being able to be as confident as you are about your numbers. Those are problems that all political movements would face. Everybody is facing these challenges. I keep wanting to talk about the culture, because one of the things I've come to after 16 years of watching how good decision making, how you get people in the room. If it is somebody you want to work with, some of those people who will need to be in the room to make difficult decisions and accept difficult decisions are more likely to come if they feel that they are going to be heard, if they feel like they might have an input. And the honest truth, I think, about where we've got to in Parliament right now is a very kind of balkanised version of how you do politics. People aren't on the same page in the same team talking to each other, working out where are the compromises. There are lots of things that I don't agree with that the government has currently put forward, but somewhere in between that and kind of where they are is a compromise. We have to be able to work in those ways. So culture, more than policy right now, is the thing I think is holding us back as a country. Somebody who recognises that, I think, is quite interesting.
But when he talks about working with other parties,
yeah.
Is he just talking about the Lib Dems and the Greens, or is he talking about the Tories and, dare I say it, reform?
Look, I think what the British public want in an environment like, I understand why Robin is frustrated, because you think if somebody else has a good idea, we ought to be able to work that through and be confident enough in our own ideology that it's not some terrible transgression that we didn't think of it. It's something that we need to be able to collaborate on. And I think it's going to be interesting for Andy Burnham coming back after 10 years to a parliament that is very divided. Politics in this country is it's not cut and thrust anymore. It's not about the debate. It's about the scream and the shout. It's about the good put down. And everybody's looking for that. And we're all the poorer for it.
So, Ben, if Andy Burnham made an overture to Nigel Farage on, I don't know, to get some kind of consensus on immigration, do you think Nigel Farage should say, yeah, OK, I'll happily have a chat?
For sure. There's one area where I can almost guarantee he's not going to do that. It seems like he's going to water down some of Shabana Mahmood's better stuff. And actually, there was talk, even in recent days, about new asylum schemes and all the rest of it. So I can't see for a second that Andy Burnham is going to do that. I'm sure there are areas where there is common ground. But on some of the big stuff, we need to take a stand on some of these things. I think the problem with this kind of consensus middle ground politics is it's led us down what I would describe as a path of least resistance for the last 25 years. And actually, when you just follow the path of least resistance, that means you don't have as much kickback and you don't have as much drama. Actually, you end up where we are now, right? Which is that ultimately people go, stop, I am fed up of this. And I do actually have some strong opinions about what the country should be. And we can't just drift to wherever is the easiest place to drift to. So at some point, he's going to have to take a stand on immigration. He's going to have to take a view on what that looks like and what he feels this country should look like. And the same thing on everything else, on the huge challenges of the economy he's going to inherit. How is he going to deal with that? He may have a view on welfare, for example, but he's inheriting the same parliamentary Labour Party that refused to put through any welfare reform last year. It goes back to the same point, doesn't it? That he can talk a nice game, but we have had a politics over many years, and you could argue Cameron, Blair, Rishi, Theresa May, all broadly the same politically, really. Nothing has really changed, and I don't expect anything to change with him either.
Were you asleep at the wheel when you put Liz Truss into office? That was quite a lot of drama, Ben. I think we've been quite solid on drama in politics and dysfunctionality as a result.
Andy would really disapprove of that, Stella.
Maybe what we now need to do is move on from the constant nitpicking to actually, you're right, there are some big, genuine debates to be had in this country about our future, the kind of economy we want, the kind of culture we want. Like I say, my kind of interest in actually what's it all about? How do we give people a sense of a life of meaning and purpose? We can't have those if you are determined to never, ever have a debate. You only want to be an opponent.
I'll believe that Andy Burnham is true to his word on this if he never, ever mentions Liz Truss in any attack.
Do kind of
Liz Truss was exactly that. Liz Truss was a response to 30 years of exactly the same old junk. We wanted to try something different. And all right, she was rubbish, granted. But you know what?
That is remarkable self-awareness.
We got to the point where it was just like, my God,
he did vote for us, I think.
Not my first choice. But it did get to the stage where it's like, can we just have somebody who says something different?
Right, let's round this off with
the first thing I think that Andy Burnham needs to do is prove that he can actually use the 160 majority. Can he get all the Labour MPs to line up in the same direction, right? If he can get all
He's not going to whip them, apparently.
Well, apparently not. Which just shows his lack of understanding of Parliament, because if you don't have whips, then people don't know what time the vote is and which lobby they should be in.
He's been in Parliament longer than all of it. He's had a hiatus and he's coming back. He does understand Parliament, but I think what he's also recognising is that we got to the point where the culture in the Labour movement hinders rather than helps our ability to move forward.
Saying that you shouldn't have whips, or that, the looking down on the whips office kind of, absolutely.
Because you're a whip, aren't you?
I am a whip, absolutely. but not a whip that runs about with a little black book. I'm a whip that tells my guys at 7 p.m. I want you to be this direction. You need them for the logistics organisation.
I don't think we're going to stop having text messages. I think you're all right, Kirsty.
Right.
I think having a culture where people feel like, for example, they can ask a question, they can work on a campaign, they might be able to have a debate with a minister would be healthy for all.
Getting rid of the whips off is getting your excuses in early for the fact that you can't control your backbenchers, and it's all right because we have this open culture where we can all disagree and it's fine.
Indeed.
Good to see that.
Apart from on this programme, of course. Right, keep your calls coming. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:32. News headlines on LBC with Matt Hewitt.
Prime Minister in waiting, Andy Burnham's promised a new era with plans to take power away from Westminster and give it to the regions. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch's predicting a summer of chaos while the change of leader takes place. Resident doctors in England have voted to accept a government pay deal, bringing ongoing strike action to an end. The pay offer is said to include more training jobs, alongside faster pay progression and the ability to cover out-of-pocket expenses, including exam fees. And the number of people killed in the earthquakes in Venezuela has risen to more than 1,700. Earlier, an official from the UN said the organisation was getting ready for the possibility of up to 10,000 deaths. LBC weather, wet and windy for Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. A little patchy rain elsewhere, lows of 11 to 17. Rain in the north and west tomorrow and also in the southeast of England for a time. Sunny spells elsewhere, highs of 15 to 23 Celsius.
This is LBC.
I think in political parties as well, that most people who go into or I won't say most, but some people who go into local politics who end up running councils wouldn't be trusted with running a whelk stall. Ben Bradley, you have been a local councillor, and you've led your local council and your county council. Do you have some sympathy with what Kevin is saying there? I mean, let's take the humour out of it. I mean, he does have a point, doesn't he?
I think there's a huge challenge in local government because in the current framework, it's unsustainable. So you have moved from a place where councils were there to deliver local services on the basis of genuinely local need to a place where councils are the delivery arm of central government and are largely social care providers, with everything else being squeezed out around the edges. So councillors who I think, for whatever level of background they have, whatever professionalism they have, usually come into local councils because they care about the community, because they want to do something genuine. Very few are political, really. I mean, I ran a group of 38 councillors, and I could count the number of politicians, in inverted commas, on one hand, probably. They're just good people who want to try and do something on a local level. Actually, what you find when you arrive is you become a forensic accountant who's got to dive through all the books and try and find tens of millions of pounds of savings every year because the model is unsustainable. And you go back around the same conversations. How many times have we done social care reform and got 9/10 of the way up the hill and then turn back around and come down again? Until stuff like that is fundamentally resolved, then it's not going to work. But it's not going to work for anybody. And we've all, it's a bit like the devolution question, isn't it? We can and ah about the boundaries and what structures of councils will work. But until you resolve the fundamental question of what are local councils for, and for me that is local choices and community delivery and all those very, very hyper-local services that people expect, what is it not for, which is to push through all the mandated stuff in central government that they don't want to take responsibility for and don't fund properly, then actually it isn't going to be fixed. And that's not because of the quality of people. I mean, I work day to day with reform councils across the country. Like any party, like any set of councillors, there are brilliant ones, there are not so brilliant ones. Some of those councils are doing amazing stuff, right? And doing genuinely unique stuff in really, really difficult circumstances, as are councillors across the country and other parties, right? But it is literally trying to keep the show on the road. You don't have the bandwidth financially to deliver the real change you would want to deliver. That requires really driven and focused central government reform. And still, I'm not seeing where that comes from under the current government.
Okay, Tom.
I think Ben's broadly right, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think that a lot of the councillors skew older, so they don't necessarily encapsulate that more diverse generation or really reflect different age groups and their priorities. I think also it's poorly paid, so I guess why would people give up a very good job, maybe they're making a large amount of money, and go into local council? And as you said, as a lot of them, they're either apolitical or in a couple of years' time They've got their eye on a Westminster seat, so they're going purely for the focus of becoming an MP. And I think this kind of also taps into another problem of what Westminster's become, and it's sort of tried to mirror what maybe a local councillor is, and you get more local champions now becoming MPs, very focused on their area, rather than being the best member of parliament that could represent an area and potentially being a minister or a cabinet minister. And I think that's why now you get a lot of MPs that aren't fit really to be in the government, but are very concerned about a couple of thousand houses being built in their area, which would be beneficial to many young people. So I think we've kind of got this crisis at the moment where there's not enough good councillors because it's poorly paid, but also at the same time, you've also got this huge problem where MPs, and many of them are just local champions solely, rather than being, this kind of intellectual bright spot.
Well, that's enough about Stella.
Yeah, cheers, Tom. I mean, I always thought that about people from watching. Look.
Have you ever been a councillor?
Yes. I did all the comedy job titles. I was mayor, because the mayor died in office, and so I had my LBJ moment. And I was chief whip, and after that, I thought I've done all the ones with the weird titles that at the age of 25, people are like, that is strange.
Where was this?
At Waltham Forest, where I was, where I've now the MP. So I've seen it from all different sides.
I stood for council in Waltham Forest on a couple of occasions when I lived there.
Oh, we must have crossed over.
Didn't get beaten by Stella, did you?
Probably.
1989-90, you would have still been at school.
I would still be at school. Look, I reject this, partly because... and I'm trying to gloss over it in the politest way I can. No, but this is a really important point for me, because I hear this a lot, this idea that, MPs have just become glorified social workers. Two things. The country isn't broken, our politics is. It starts with the fact that nobody has a job description. So I always thought Boris Johnson was right when he said that people go and see their MP because they've run out of better ideas of things to do. And actually, we have very little formal power. We have influence. But I always have a discipline that if I can't justify the thing I'm working on in Walthamstow and Westminster and vice versa, I shouldn't be doing it. So yes, I do a lot of community organising. I do a lot of casework, because I look at every bit of casework and go, is this an outlier? Is this a really extreme thing that's happened that will never happen again? And it's just a question of supporting somebody through this? Or is this telling me something about the way in which we run this country that's broken, that needs fixing? That's where we're working on things like payday lending. That's where we're working on women's rights and abortion, tackling things like solar panels, and how do you actually do bulk buying, which is what we're now doing in Walthamstow come from. But I do it with the sole intent of saying, actually, this is telling us something. When you lose that connection, you lose something very precious in the British system that they don't have and they don't value in other political systems. And I genuinely think we should value it, be clear about what those powers are with it, how it interconnects with local government. Because you're right, local government and MPs often end up in tension, big fish and small ponds. But actually being clear about how the process of change happens, it is about the networks and the relationships you build. Our state can't keep up with the way the world is changing so quickly. People need to be the interconnections between it. That's why it isn't the country that's broken, it's politics.
But I would also reject the sense that, of course, it's nice that they've got a sense of community and they are tied to it. But you look at the two most effective prime ministers within the last 50 years. You look at Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher. They didn't come from their own constituency.
Will you be rude about Clement Attlee? Because he's from Walthamstow, mate.
But I think this is kind of the problem, that there is maybe an expectation among the electorate that they've got to come from that certain patch. And therefore, as I mentioned before, the two most effective prime ministers that we've seen and did bring radical change
I have always said to my local residents, if all I bring is the postcode, that is not enough. But an understanding of living a shared life and going, hang on a minute, what is it about our community that can offer this country? That's why I go back to what I liked what Andy Burnham said today, is it's not an either or. There are kids all around this country who could do amazing things. Barriers hold them back. We all miss out as a result. I know who those kids are in Walthamstow. They'll be different in your part of town.
That's literally just what Boris Johnson said in slightly different language.
That is harsh. Just because I'm blonde, mate. That is rude.
Better hair, though. But the fact is that by sort of saying that all the wealth is centred in London, I mean, know, I know your patch, you know your patch better than I do, even though I did live there for a few years. But, I mean, it's not a rich area. No. There are pockets of real poverty in a lot of London boroughs. And to pitch, as I think he almost was on the edge of doing today, London against the rest of the country, I thought that is not a good way to go.
Well, I don't think it's Andy Burnham who's doing that. I think for too long our politics has become balkanised into this idea that there need to be winners and losers, and what you vote for in different parties are the people who they want to blame, if it's immigrants or big business, and none of it actually solves any of these problems. What's interesting about the Manchester model, what's interesting actually, I think, to be fair to Sadiq, he's trying to do, is how do you bring people together around an outcome? What I think people get frustrated about with politics and politicians is they come to us for an outcome, and we all say, it's not us, mate. It's the council, it's the government.
Frustrated because I haven't brought her in yet.
Just going back to the question that Kevin asked, in terms of, the kind of devolution of power, if you have a rubbish mayor or a rubbish local council, then the people in that area suffer. If we've got a rubbish prime minister, then every one of us suffers. So actually, the more that you devolve power, the more you are protected from having a rubbish prime minister. It's absolutely the case. You
two just rays of sunshine today, aren't you?
Well, it's not sunny out there, though. Exactly what you were saying. People are struggling. They're finding things really, really difficult, right?
Right, but they don't need us to find someone to blame. They need us to find some answers.
But it might be the case, if Andy Burnham devolves more power to different areas, that Birmingham comes up with a really great idea that can be used in Manchester, that can be used in Liverpool, that can be used in Glasgow, right? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know anything about English geography, right? I just know that those are cities, so that's as close as good as it gets. If it's not between Dundee and Elgin, I don't know where it is.
Believe it or not, do you know that Manchester isn't even Britain's third largest city by population? Do you know which is?
I have no idea.
Leeds.
Do you know what? Somebody mentioned Leeds to me this morning in a random conversation.
It's a city in Yorkshire.
I don't have a clue where it is. Although I was told that Leeds Castle is in Kent, and I was pretty sure that Leeds isn't.
Yeah,
but you know what, just go back to the north thing, right? Manchester's barely in the north of England in geographical terms, right? Calling yourself if you draw a line from the top to the bottom of England, Manchester's not that, not that far.
Ian's struggling with outside of Watford right now. So.
It would take me 4 hours to drive south to Manchester from where I live, right? So, he needs to, if he's going to do this kind of big tent thing, if he's going to think about areas outside London, he needs to talk to the rest of us, not just what he classes as the north. He needs to talk to Wales, he needs to listen to Wales, he needs to talk to Scotland, he needs to listen to Scotland, or he's going to risk becoming a prime minister for the north of England, in the same way that people might consider Keir Starmer or some of the other prime ministers who have prime ministers for London. He needs to think about that language.
Well, Michael says, please, please, please stop broadcasting negative news. You must always look for a more positive approach. It reminds me of Margaret Thatcher once said to a journalist, stop being a moaning Minnie. well, you've been very positive, haven't you, Stella, throughout all of this? So
no, but all right, come on, let's have a moment about this, because you would expect me as a London MP to recognise that concern that, again, we're still going to see this sectarianism. Actually, I just think it's quite striking that Andy is taking that argument head on. Our socialism shouldn't be that somebody has to suffer for you to thrive. You're getting it wrong if that's what happens. So what you need to work out is, where is the talent? Where is the opportunity? How do you bring it all together?
The secret is not to have socialism.
Well, but that's why you never succeeded in Walthamstow, mate, because it's God's own country and therefore we care about each other.
It couldn't be worse than the last guy. That's optimistic.
8:47.
Are you talking about Farage?
This is LBC.
Exactly. I mean, what a horrible thing. The thing is, Alistair Campbell today said it was a masterstroke. Horrible thing. The thing is, Alistair Campbell today said it was a masterstroke. And I'm thinking, did you say that when Boris Johnson went into that fridge to avoid questions from Piers Morgan? I don't think he did he? Kirsty Blackman.
I think he should have answered questions. If he's going to be standing up, answering questions at the dispatch box as Prime Minister, he should really show people what he's got.
Ben?
Same deal. Somebody who stood...
Stop agreeing with me, Ben.
We're on the same page,
You're just
Kirsty. You know we
ruining
are.
Kirsty's career. Every second passing.
We'll be done after this. It's somebody who stood there only a couple of years ago and said that Rishi Sunak had no mandate to be there, had no democratic right to run the country, had all these questions to answer and must have a general election now, for him to march into office in number 10 without asking any questions, not just now, but until October, pretty much, as he disappears off for recess, is the most hypocritical thing, and puts him right back in the Keir Starmer box of early days hypocrisy, as far as I'm concerned. If he wants to build any respect with the people out there in the country, he needs to be true to his word.
Because there's another aspect of this, isn't it? As a politician, particularly as a Prime Minister, you don't want to gratuitously annoy the Westminster lobby, do you?
Not at all. Not at all.
You're feral beast.
Exactly. And again, Andy Burnham wants to become Prime Minister. He promised the biggest change in a generation. Well, if it's the biggest change in a generation, then I think political journalists should have the ability to ask questions on behalf of the public. I think that's a very reasonable act.
And at PMQs last week, Kemi Badenoch looked at you, not just you, Stella, but the whole lot of you, saying you don't like it, they don't like it Upham. Well, I mean, in a sense, we could say this about Andy Burnham here, because he did do an interview with Victoria Derbyshire on Newsnight, which was an absolute car crash for him, and he hasn't done one since.
It's one speech. He wanted the speech to stand on his own. That's what they said about it. I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm sure he will take questions from the press. What I'd quite like to see them do, if I'm honest, is move on from letting only influencers ask questions, because I had some concerns as somebody who's done a lot of work about some of the people who are more unsavoury online. Some of them Reform I know well. But, people who probably should be tested a bit more rigorously. We need political scrutiny. That's going to come from the press. It's going to come from other politicians. But you're also saying, everyone's saying, well, what does he stand for? What's he going to do? He set out a speech to be able to do that. I think the honest truth from all of this conversation is he probably couldn't win either way.
He had a quick
You'd have spent the whole time going, yeah, but who's going to be your chancellor? But who's going to be foreign secretary? He said he wanted to set out what he stands for. He's done that. I'm sure moving on, there will be more opportunity. I think you'll get your chance, Tom. But the Altrincham boy will be heard, I'm sure.
He had a swipe about the speculation. Well, let's cut through the speculation and let's ask him a few
he literally
questions.
said, I'd like to talk about what I stand for, so I'm not going to get into this. And you're saying, no, I want to get into this.
We need more detail.
You are
on what he
making the
stands for.
case for why maybe on this occasion he was trying to set out, because bear in mind, he's not actually Prime Minister yet.
But is he going to become
There is
Prime
some
Minister?
humility in all of this.
Is he going to become Prime Minister without answering questions from the press? I mean, we don't know in terms of the timeline. The Prime Minister's resigning on the 9th of July. Well,
it's only 3 weeks till he takes over.
Can you promise that? Like, is he actually going to do it?
Speech. The idea that this suddenly means that PMQs isn't going to happen. I mean, I have to be honest. I don't think PMQs is the best shop front for politics and all the things we're talking about.
From the press next week?
But I'm not his diary secretary, love. But I do know that this is about trying to set out the thing that people are saying is missing, which is what do you stand for? Where are you taking us? What's the big picture? That's what he did today.
Just don't press me on
and
it,
you've just
'cause I can't
spent.
answer it.
I know, but you just spent the last hour talking about it.
I think we should move on from Andy Burnham and turn our attention to Nigel Farage. Roy in Rutland says, will Nigel Farage end up resigning as leader of Reform UK over his £5 million gift? Now, the former Reform UK chairman David Bull said on Friday that speaking as a friend and a colleague, Nigel Farage needs to take some time out and have a bit of a break, really. What happened to David Bull, Ben Bradley? Because he was chairman and then suddenly he wasn't.
He was. We've got lots going on, haven't we? There's all sorts going on.
I think it's a surprise to him that he wasn't.
I'm far above my pay grade, that, Ian. I don't know what goes on in the corridors.
What are you doing on this programme, then?
Well, not actually speculating and guessing like everybody else. David's quite happy cracking on as far as I'm aware over in Suffolk. I think, speaking of people who answer questions, Nigel Farage answers more questions from more journalists than any other political leader going, and is quite prepared, as we are with our regular weekly press conferences, to put ourselves in that position and answer those
questions about his £5 million.
Well, it is answering those questions.
He's not answering those questions.
He's quite clearly answering those questions and saying it's none of your business. But I don't know the...
That's not an answer.
I don't know it is an answer. You might not like it. But I don't know the facts of that any more than anybody else does. There's an investigation into that. The outcome will be what the outcome is.
Don't you think we should know the facts, though? Because that is quite
there's
a
an
big amount of
investigation
money.
into that, and the outcome will be what the outcome
Trying
is.
to interfere in our politics.
I've got no reason
quite serious,
to disbelieve anything that Nigel says until proven otherwise.
Wouldn't you prefer he just gave the money back?
No.
So you think it's acceptable for him to take £5 million?
I think what he does in his personal life is up to him. And if
his personal life, though,
if he is clear that he's done nothing wrong, and there's an investigation that, if that's the case, will say so, then fine, the world moves on.
All right, how about this? If I propose a cap on individual donations, will Reform back it so that nobody can have these questions again?
I think Labour should stop trying to draw lines around
That'll be a no,
donations
then,
that
won't
suit
it?
them.
But you're quite happy
purposes.
for money to come into our politics.
But that donor has now registered in the UK.
Yeah, no, I still think £5 million quid. £5 million quid, and he wants nothing for it. Come on.
Did you say the same when David Sainsbury gave £5 million?
I don't think. No,
Party?
I think there should be a cap on individual donations, and I'm going to propose one as part of the debate. And I hope that we'll get cross-party consensus on this, because it damages us all when people think we can be bought.
If you can't get individual
donors
donors and you can't get any trade union money, the Labour Party will go bust, Stella.
You think a trade union is the same as an individual donor? You think trade unions with millions of members are the same as an individual donor giving £5 million quid, and the damage that does to people's confidence in our politics and what people's motivations are.
More of those
he's a man of the people. You know, a man of the people, exactly. You know, just £5 million quid. All of our constituents get £5 million quid on a regular basis. Exactly.
Nobody disputes the idea that Nigel Farage is a rich guy. I think we all kind of get that. I don't think it's the biggest thing on the public mind.
Okay, let's bring it back to the question. Do you think that Nigel Farage will lead Reform UK into the next election? Because there are an increasing number of people who seem to think he won't.
I'm sure that he will. As David quite rightly says, we all deserve a holiday and we've all had a difficult time. It's nearly August. We'll all go away for a couple of weeks and have a lovely time. And then Nigel Farage will lead Reform.
You want Andy Burnham to answer difficult questions, but you don't want Nigel Farage to answer difficult questions.
He does answer it, you just don't like it.
I think Farage will lead Reform UK into the next election. I think the biggest problem he's got, though, of course, this £5 million donation is hanging over his head, but he doesn't look like he's enjoying it as much as he ever used to. I think this was kind of the big pull of Farage, particularly to his supporters and maybe those who voted Tory in the past that are thinking about reform, and that have kind of like this happy-go-lucky character, he's a bit more charming. We were talking about Burnham having this sense of positivity, which I think Farage had. And I feel that for the first time in quite a long time, Farage doesn't look like that. And I think this is kind of one of those that he is the great political survivor. We've seen him come back.
He looks tired.
He does look tired, yeah. And I don't think it's a coincidence.
He can have a fortnight in Magaluf and then he'll be back.
Who knows?
Well, with £5 million quid, he can probably stay in a very posh hotel, can't he? But that still doesn't answer the question about whether he's fit to be Prime Minister if he takes money like that.
I feel that Farage of old wouldn't have said, like he did on LBC, I think with Nick Ferrari, that he could have spent that £5 million quid on Ferraris. That didn't seem like a very Farage comment. Seems a bit out of kilter, not one of those that he's got that great touch with his base. And I feel that maybe there is something. Who knows? I still think I agree with Ben.
Let's move on to our fun question. It's from Barry in Kings Lynn. After the death of Dame Penelope Keith from The Good Life today, what's your favourite classic sitcom? We did have to explain who Penelope Keith was to two members of our panel. I'll leave it to you, dear listener, to work out which two those were. 36-year-old Ben Bradley.
You sold me down the river there. I think it finished before I was certainly watching the sitcom.
Shame. Shame. What have you got at Ben's Britain?
My favourite is inevitably Friends of an era.
Really?
It used to be on a Friday night. You could sit down at 6 o'clock when I was a young teenager. It was The Simpsons, it was Malcolm in the Middle, and you'd work all your way through to, I think, 8 or 9 o'clock, Friends on Channel 4 on a Friday night.
35-year-old Chris Humphries, my producer, he's nodding his head as well.
Do you watch anything British, love? I mean, you've ever heard of Faulty Towers?
Oh, we're going to go into all that.
Absolutely classic.
That's before my time as well.
Faulty Towers is a classic.
How old do you think I am?
I just told her.
I just think
I do enjoy John Cleese on Twitter.
Why do you hate Britain? Why do you hate Britain? If you don't love Faulty Towers, how can you not? I just hear the phrase Faulty Towers and I can hear my dad giggling away. You can watch Faulty Towers again and again and again.
Arguing about who loves Britain more.
I mentioned Andy Burnham. I think I got away with it.
Go for Cheers.
No, again, I am not that old.
Look it up. There's this thing called Google.
Hang on.
So
When I'm doing data entry, which I do quite a lot of during campaigns.
Dating entry?
Data entry.
Data? All right, okay.
That's the second time that you've looked at me like that. Data entry. Then I always have a programme on in the corner, right? Yeah. And it's usually Malcolm in the Middle. So I've seen every episode of Malcolm in the Middle.
What data do you enter?
So when you go out canvassing, you go out door knocking.
You're the MP. Surely you have lackeys to do that for you.
No, I am the lackey.
Oh, right, okay.
So I do that as well. But usually I have Malcolm in the Middle.
They lost the by-election.
I have now watched Malcolm in the Middle so many times I know every single word. So I decided during this campaign, during the Holyrood one, when I was doing my stuff on the computer, I was like, I'm going to watch The Good Life. So I have watched almost every episode of The Good Life this year. Absolutely brilliant. Felicity Kendall is something else. She is incredible.
But not as good as Penelope Keith, obviously.
No, gutted about Penelope Keith.
Minder, Dad's Army. There are brilliant British sitcoms that
Minder was not a sitcom.
Oh, come on, it was.
No,
it was.
wasn't.
Minder was a sitcom. It was a sitcom, and Arthur Daly is a legend. And everyone should watch. Google it again. There's Netflix is there for your friends. I'm sure it'll be on there.
I'm aware of Dad's Army. Thanks,
well done.
Thank you for the education.
But like British sitcoms, Clement and Refrain, were world beating and can be, again, if anything, what we need to do is make sure we're hitting that mark.
Yeah, and abolish Mrs. Brown's Boys.
2.4 children.
Please do that.
Oh God, yeah, no, I'm with you. We can all agree. Consensus breaks out. Get rid of Mrs. Brown's Boys. And Outnumbered as well. Great sitcom.
Outnumbered?
Outnumbered.
Junk.
No.
Oh.
You don't laugh. I mean, you're supposed to laugh at programmes like this, and none of them produce a laugh. What's that other one that Lee, what's his name, is in?
Not Going Out.
Not Going Out.
No.
I mean,
Not seen
Tom.
it. My favourite, I think Fawlty Towers has got to be that. It reminds me very young watching it on video. And my dad putting the video in and watching it, and I think I watched all 2 series within a week, and I found it hilarious even at the age of 7 or 8.
For the record, I am also aware of videos, Stella. Thank you.
Right, well, on that note of consensus, thank you all very much indeed for taking part tonight. On the programme tomorrow night, we have Conservative peer and former Cabinet Minister Baroness Nicky Morgan, Labour MP Joe Morris, the political strategist Joe Tanner, plus the Italian political journalist Antonello Guerra, who reports on the news here in the UK for the Italian newspaper La Repubblica. Right, coming up in the next hour, I want to talk about council housing, because the last time that council housing hit the headlines was when Margaret Thatcher promised to sell council houses to their tenants, and it was a very popular policy too. It won her the 79 election, arguably, and it won the Conservatives a huge number of so-called working class voters, many of whom have stuck with the Conservatives over the years. Labour now, under Andy Burnham, are promising the biggest council house building programme since the Second World War. Well, that's an eye-catching headline, isn't it? But what lies behind it? How would it be financed? Where would these houses go? Do you think this is a good idea? Is this the way to solve Britain's housing crisis? Coming up next on LBC.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Andy Burnham said Britain is stuck in a rut and set out his plans for a new direction. The likely new Prime Minister says he wants to create a number 10 North as part of a redistribution of power, and he signalled an overhaul of business rates to revive high streets. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch's concerned more devolution would give control to people who don't know what they're doing. Ben Bradley, Reform's head of local government delivery, told Iain Dale he's sceptical about the Burnham effect.
Everybody said the same stuff for the last 7 Prime Ministers in a row. We're going to build more houses, we're going to pass more power down through devolution. Everybody said that, Rishi Sunak said that, Keir Starmer said that. Nobody's done it, because actually it's not that simple, is it? So what does he know that the last 7 Prime Ministers haven't known about how to actually get this stuff through the system?
Resident doctors in England have voted to accept a pay deal, bringing to an end long-running strike action. Just over half of eligible British Medical Association members voted to accept the deal on a turnout of 57%. It'll give them an average 6.6% pay rise by April next year and thousands of speciality training places. Dr Jack Fletcher from the BMA says they haven't got everything they wanted.
This is very much a journey. Our pay remains down compared to what it was in 2008. This represents the next step. I'm really hopeful that the pay review body next year will recommend something that takes us further on that journey towards pay restoration.
The number of people known to have been killed in last week's earthquakes in Venezuela has risen to more than 1,700. Earlier, an official from the UN said the organisation was getting ready for the possibility of a death toll 6 times higher than that. In sports, Brazil had to come from behind to get a 2-1 victory over Japan in the last 32 of the World Cup. And at Wimbledon, every British player who completed a match today has been knocked out. And defending champion Yannick Sinner said he was relieved to have avoided a serious injury after slipping at the baseline and falling to the turf during his first round win. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 23 points at 10,484. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.15. LBC weather, wet and windy for Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. A little patchy rain elsewhere, lows of 11 to 17 degrees. Rain in the north and west tomorrow and also in the southeast of England for a time. Sunny spells elsewhere, highs of 15 to 23 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Very good evening, 9 on LBC. I have to say, I really enjoyed that Hour of Cross Question. I hope you did too. Now, we're going to go back to Andy Burnham's speech in the next hour and highlight one particular proposal, which I thought was quite eye-catching, where he pledged to deliver what he called the biggest council house building programme since the post-war period. Now, if you remember the post-war period, some of you may do, it's a bit before my time, but I know that under Harold Macmillan, when he was housing minister in the Conservative government, which came in after the Attlee government, they were building I think 350,000 houses a year, many of which were council houses, because a lot of the housing stock was destroyed during the war, and there were lots of prefabs that sprung up all over the place, which were only ever meant to last a few years, but a lot of them lasted a lot longer than that. When I was in Norwich in the early 1980s, there were still some wartime prefabs that were still being lived in at that time. And then, of course, Margaret Thatcher came along and sold off hundreds of thousands of council houses, a hugely popular policy at the time. But some people put that down to the fact that we now have a housing problem in this country. I think it's a lot deeper than that, because all of those houses or flats are still there. They're just not necessarily owned by the local council anymore. So this was a very eye-catching pledge that Andy Burnham made. Do you think he has any chance of delivering on it, though? He said the UK is in a housing trap which is having a ruinous impact on public finances. He said he would adopt a national housing-first philosophy and criticise the government freeze on local housing allowance. He focused on rebalancing resources between national and local governments and pledged to expand, well, we know he's pledged to expand the Prime Minister's office to Manchester. But it's all very well to say, well, we're going to have the largest house building programme. But how's that going to work? Because there were no details. He didn't give any details here. Let's just hear a little of what he said when he announced this big promise on council houses and why he's making it.
Britain has lost almost 1.5 million council homes since the 1980s, and around the same number of people are now on housing waiting lists and have been there for a very long time. As a result, the country is in a housing trap. We are forced to chase rents in the private rented sector through the benefit system. When governments try to control these costs by freezing local housing allowance, it makes families homeless and places unfunded pressures on councils when they have to pay for temporary accommodation. Britain's housing crisis is having a ruinous impact on its public finances. So, working with local areas, Number 10 North will oversee the biggest council house building programme since the post-war period.
My first question would be, why would that be overseen by Number 10 North? Council house building is surely a national issue, not just one for the north of England. It's also relevant to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland too, as well as the south, southwest and the Midlands. So I don't really see why that would be for this new Number 10 North to preside over. But how will it be paid for? because with borrowing rates at the moment relatively high compared to what they have been, he can't stick to the so-called fiscal rules, which in that interview with Victoria Derbyshire, he quite clearly showed that he didn't know what they were. He can't possibly stick within Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules and have a massive house building programme like this, can he? So how would it be financed? Is this a sort of innovative policy, though, that you think, well, I kind of like the cut of his jib on this? Yes, he may not have all the details worked out, but if this is the direction he's going to go in, maybe younger generations will have much more hope of being able to afford to rent a property and then possibly buy one. Pete Apps joins me now, journalist specialising in housing, who's the author of the book Homesick: How Housing Broke London and How to Fix It. Pete, very good evening. What were you surprised by this announcement?
I suppose I was a little bit surprised by the ambition of it. I think that Keir Starmer's regime had promised at some point the biggest rise in council housing in a generation. So we're going a little bit back further than that. It depends a little bit what he means by the post-war period. I think I was looking at the numbers today, and we built 140,000 council homes in 1977, and I think you'd struggle to count 1977 as post-war. So,
well, factually it is, but
well, yeah, I mean, as is any time is post-war, isn't it? I suppose, but I suppose that's outside the post-war period. So if he's going to fulfil this, he's got to get over that number. That would be an extraordinary rise. I mean, we built, I think, 11,000 social rented homes last financial year. A fairly small proportion of those were built by councils, but I don't think that particularly matters to Andy. I think he's just looking for social rented housing, but it's a big rise. And I mean, I think you were right to identify in the preamble to this conversation that he can't do that very easily, if at all, in the kind of fiscal setup that we have at the moment, because build costs are very high. They're historically high. It costs, in certain parts of London can cost up to $500,000 to build a home, and it costs a lot of money anywhere. And in order to let a home at a council rent, you have to put a reasonable amount of public money in at the start. We did that in the post-war period because you were basically borrowing on the fact that the economy was going to grow over the next 20 or 30 years as we got out of this post-war period. And that was how we built, not just council housing, but all of the kind of welfare state stuff that was generated in those decades. We probably don't have that flexibility now, and certainly don't have that ability to borrow. So where he gets the money from to do it is tricky. I mean, I did agree with his analysis that the current situation we have and that we've had since the 1990s, where we are effectively lashed to kind of private rents, because if people need housing, they get housed in the private rented sector, and then as rents go up, benefits go up, and then benefits get capped, and then people get made homeless, doesn't work, and is something the government needs to break out of. If you could take that money that we're spending on housing benefit and use it to build social housing instead, then you would be sort of rebalancing the money we spend every year on housing, not increasing it. But the difficulty is how you get from the point we're in now to that point, because you would need to build the housing first before you can reduce the benefit.
And you can't go from 0 to 100 in 12 months, can you? First of all, I doubt whether the building trade is in a position to build all these houses in the speed that he seemed to indicate that he would want to, because I've just looked up the figures here. In Greater London, in the last 3 years, for a total of council housing and socially rented homes, each year it's been about 1,100. Now, I mean, if you're going to put that up to 10,000, I mean, that presumably would be a little bit of a challenge for the building industry.
I mean, I think that maybe the building industry at this point, whether they could get to 100, they wouldn't get to 140,000 overnight. I think the building industry at this point in the UK would welcome a good deal more state investment, because particularly in areas like London, there isn't an awful lot of private sector work going on at the moment. So you have a lot of firms, down the supply chain that are, quite keen to work, but don't have the work available. And so if the government was coming in and putting a lot more public money on the table, then I think the industry would welcome that injection, because they're not particularly flushed with contracts at this point. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the ambition is right. And I think economically you can make an argument for the fact that it's better to spend money on new council housing than it is on housing benefit. I think that the problem is that is faced by all politicians at the moment. Fiscally, how do you make that work? You know, I think I assume that he's hoping that he'll be able to say that investment in council housing is infrastructure, is national infrastructure, and investment in infrastructure which generates rents over the life of its existence is different from spending money on kind of revenue, spending money on teachers' salaries or housing benefit for that matter. So you can kind of discount it from the fiscal rules and borrow a bit more for that. That is what I imagine he would be doing. But that's not Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules. So if he's saying he's sticking to Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules, then he's in a bind.
Pete, thank you. Good to talk to you as always. That's Pete Apser, journalist specialising in housing, and his book is called Homesick, How Housing Broke London and How to Fix It. We'll come to your calls in a moment. One other aspect of this is, do we need to rethink the whole idea of council housing? Because it used to be that if you were allocated a council house, you basically had it until you died. And you probably then passed it down, I mean, not through wills or anything, but through the local council, you passed it down to one of your children. I wonder whether we really need to rethink that and think that council housing should be for people who literally can't afford to rent a house in the private sector. I don't know how you create a system to enable that to happen, but should council homes really be for life? The clue there is in the word home, though, is it? Because some people call them council homes, some people call them council houses, but it is your home, isn't it? 0345 6060 973. And do you worry about how Andy Burnham would actually pay for this to happen? Is he making a promise that he might live to regret? It's 16 minutes past 9.
Hear every side of the story. This is LBC.
Speak positively around council housing, because certainly over the last few years, I think that has been lacking. I think we do have to be, I mean, we are understandably going to be very cautious about this as well, while welcoming the idea that actually, you know, we could end up with more council housing, because it's not just about building more homes. I mean, councils build homes at the moment and let them out at what is commonly mistermed, we would say, affordable housing, which can be anything up to 80% of the full market rent. And that's not a big enough difference, really, to make a significant difference to the maybe some of the poorer people being able to afford them. Actually, what we need to see is homes that are actually let out at social rents, which are 50% of the market rate, and is much more realistic for people on kind of ordinary average salaries. So, and we haven't heard that commitment from Burnham. He's just said that he wants to upscale, you know, the building of council housing. But as you say, we really haven't got a lot of detail on top of that.
What is the housing gap in this country at the moment? By which I mean the number of people who don't have effectively permanent housing, whether they could own it or whether they could rent it. Because I mean, over the last, well, goodness knows how many years, that number presumably is increasing year on year.
Yeah, well, the figure at the moment is 131,000. Households who are in temporary accommodation, and that is a very big, and that includes around 170,000 children. And it is a trap. I mean, it's been referred to as a trap. It very much is a trap. Once people are in temporary accommodation, it is very difficult to get out of, because the range of options generally available to you are very, very small. And this is costing at the moment. This is costing us around 30 billion in housing benefit alone. Is going, towards keeping people in temporary accommodation rather than finding permanent solutions. And it's very, very obvious that if you are paying, if government is paying housing benefit to people who are in temporary accommodation that is very expensive anyway, way above normal market rates. And is generally provided by private landlords, that money is going out of the public purse and doesn't come back. If we can build council housing, then every penny that is paid in rent, whether it's coming in through housing benefit, it will get recycled into the public purse. If it's people's earned income that is paying for that, or pensions or whatever it is, then again it is coming into the public purse. It is coming into public funds, and that can then go to kind of social good, really, whether it's spending on the NHS or spending on more housing. It's at least being recycled or being brought into the public funds. So there are very, very strong economic arguments for the economic health of the country as to why we should have a healthy and thriving and large council housing section, really, which is something that we have lacked over the last few years. As you pointed out earlier, a lot of council homes were sold off. We do have a lot of councils now who actually have no council housing whatsoever. So one of the things you were talking about, the construction industry needing to kind of build up to provide the numbers of council homes that would be needed, we would also need council workers to be increased. But very, very quickly, it will begin to pay for itself because we won't be spending these vast amounts of money on providing very expensive temporary accommodation.
I've just done the sum. 130,000 homes that people are in temporary accommodation at the moment. Divide that by parliamentary constituencies and you get 200 per parliamentary constituency, which, I mean, that it doesn't seem unreasonable that those could be built within a couple of years, does it? But you just made a really important point, because there are so many councils now that have either sold off all of their council housing or they've contracted it out to what are they called? These trusts that was started by Tony Blair about 20 years ago. The
ALMOs, arm's length management organisation.
So you've got many councils that don't have a council housing department now. But that means that they would have to set that up again from scratch, wouldn't it? And that will cost some money itself.
Yeah, but you can't. I don't think you can hope to do anything about. We've gone beyond even calling it a housing crisis. It's a housing emergency, and I don't think anybody has presented any viable solution that doesn't involve some kind of upfront costs. And to be honest, if that means relaxing the fiscal rules, then it is very worthwhile, because it is a significant investment in a later financial health of the whole country. I mean, one of the things we looked at recently and other groups have done research on is just how much this bad housing, but also insecure housing and the worry about insecure housing, how much that impacts, for example, on the NHS. The ripple effects to our society as a health of having poor housing are really significant. They really prevent a healthy growth of the economy and the health of the people involved. So there are lots of positives around building council housing, providing secure homes. You were talking about, it's not just a house, is it? It's somebody's home. Yeah. For somebody to be able to live and feel secure in their home, that has a lot of positive ripple effects, and it helps kind of build, sustainable communities and reduce antisocial behaviour. So there are a lot of positives. But, if we look at it in pure economic terms, even then it still makes a lot of sense to do it. But you have to put that investment in the first place.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Suzanne. That's Suzanne Mooner there, Secretary of the Housing Campaign Group, SHAC. So, if you have lived at a council house, maybe you're living in one right now, do you think it's a good idea for Andy Burnham to raise the hopes of people who might like to have their own council home in the future? Or do you think this is one of those promises that he's going to find very difficult to deliver on, let alone pay for? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Let's take this text here from Kevin, who says, after the Second World War, 5 million council homes were built. Under Margaret Thatcher's right to buy, 2 million have been sold. Many of them are in the hands of buy-to-let landlords. Renting them is double the price of council rent. Luke's in Orpington. Hi, Luke.
Hi, good evening. I welcome the announcement, but the realistic way of achieving it is not there. I owned a construction cleaning company, so I had first-hand sight of these things, and the plan which is required to just put down clumps of 800 homes or whatever, which is the sort of size of projects we used to get, is so humongous. I don't know what sort of numbers he was pledging. Did he actually pledge a number?
No.
No. I mean, he's got 2.5 years to do it before the general election, max, assuming he doesn't do a general election sooner. So trying to get the planning through, the water board through, you have to change, you have to up the amount of water, clean water, schools, police, everything else. But leave alone just this sheer fact of, are there enough builders, plumbers, sparkies, and construction cleaning companies are definitely not enough. And everything has to be in place for it to happen.
Well, and also the building regulations and other regulations that are put on new homes now, whether they're council homes or private ones, I mean, they have added tens of thousands of pounds to the cost of building a house.
I mean, we cleaned, as I say, sites of, say, 500 to 800 homes at a time, and the amount of years that went into each project was absolutely vast. And that's with full steam, some of the biggest companies you can think of. And they're not sitting around looking for contracts. They've got the contracts. What holds them back is either they're waiting for the land to go up in value or the housing, then they can sell it at a higher price, or the cost of materials is too expensive. So the cost to build a house now costs twice as much as what it was, say, 10 years ago. Costs are vast. But, construction cleaning companies, firsthand, there aren't enough of us out there just to get it onto the next stage, because it takes a 3-stage clean. You have to clean before the paint, then after the paint, then after the finish, then you have sparkling. It's a huge job. And I don't see how he's going to get the sort of numbers. He's going to pledge it will be more than post-war times, but that's probably not compared to much at all, really, especially if he's given a number. So I guess he can meet that, because he just needs to up it a tiny bit. But to make any difference, it's going to make any difference to sort of adding to the numbers. It's just not realistic.
I wonder whether this is a vote winner or not. I mean, it hasn't been a subject of real political debate for many, many years. I think most people, when Margaret Thatcher started selling off council houses, thought it was a really good idea, particularly those who were able to buy them. But do you think it's a vote winner, Luke?
Well, it sounds good on paper until you look at the realistic chance of being able to achieve it. I think they need to look at perhaps some sort of housing which is quicker to build, prefab type things again, maybe just to purely get the numbers. And obviously, you've got to look at parking roads. It's just unbelievable the amount of logistics to try and achieve what you want to achieve to make any numbers which are worth talking about. Otherwise, it's just going at the rate that they're going at. And the other thing he didn't talk about, of course, was immigration, because those had numbers every day. The size of a secondary school come over the waters every day, about 900 people. So they need housing too. So you need to do something about that to stop the flow of that, just to try and get standstill, let alone improve the situation.
OK, Luke, thank you very much. Anastasia says council houses have got a bad reputation. Many current council houses are needing repairs. Remember the little 2-year-old boy that died because of the damp? Many council houses are bad. Where is the money coming from for all of these council houses? Well, I mean, you really are generalising there. And yes, that was a tragic situation. I think it was in Rochdale, wasn't it? Was it Runcorn? One or the other. And there are, I mean, I remember the first time I got involved in politics in Norwich in the early 1980s and going round leafleting and canvassing council blocks on the Milecross estate in Norwich. And I saw some terrible, terrible housing in Catton Grove in that area. And they were totally neglected by the local council. They were almost forgotten. And I'm not sure. I mean, all of those flats and houses, they are still there. I'd like to think that they are in much better condition now than they were then. And I think this is where Labour councils in particular, I think in the 70s and 80s, got a really bad reputation for ignoring the needs of council tenants because they thought, well, they're going to vote Labour anyway. So we don't need to spend a lot of money there. They're not going to vote for anyone else. They lived to rue that, particularly in places like Glasgow, where in the end the SNP came along and said, well, look, we will make things better. And I think actually by and large they did. But there are still too many places in England where council housing is just seen almost as an afterthought, and the council tenants have to fight tooth and nail to get anything done in the way of basic repairs. Just the case that Luke mentioned there was the 2-year-old boy. He was called Awab Ishak, and he and his family lived in a housing association property in Rochdale, which was affected by mould. Awab's law has since been introduced, which forces social housing landlords to fix big problems such as mould, dangerous damp, and other structural problems quickly. And I'm pretty sure I remember that was a housing. Yes, it was a housing association rather than a local council. But it was the local council, I think, that suffered the backwash from a lot of that. And I mean, housing associations always used to be seen as organisations that were sort of a bit of a cut above the local council housing department. Not sure that's the case anymore, I have to say. So what's your reaction to this pledge by Andy Burnham to embark on the biggest council house building programme since the Second World War? Is that something that you think will gain votes? Do you think it's realistic? And would you be somebody who would actually rather like to rent a house from your local council? It's 9:31 on LBC. News headlines with Matt Hewitt.
Andy Burnham says a number 10 base in Manchester will be the nerve centre of a rewired Britain. The Prime Ministerial hopeful is promising a huge devolution of power outside London in his first major speech since returning to Westminster. Resident doctors in England have voted to accept an offer to improve pay and working conditions, ending a year of on and off strike action. It involves an average 6.6% pay uplift and will be implemented by next April. And a close aide to the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has pleaded guilty to gambling on the date of the 2024 general election. 41-year-old Craig Williams used to be the Tory MP for Montgomeryshire and Cardiff North. LBC weather, wet and windy for Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. A little patchy rain elsewhere and lows of 11 to 17 degrees.
This is LBC.
Your weight, presumably. Come and have a cuddle. Cherry, don't. Oh, daylight. We're in someone else's... Oh, daylight. We're in someone else's house. No, I'm sorry.
You're not shaking.
Why should I be? I don't find the thought of improvised lovemaking erotic.
The chair should be shaking. Their generator's packed up.
Well, I'm not surprised at that. Oh, well, there's obviously nothing you can do about it. Why don't we go home and, we could, well, we could...
Yes. I better have a look at it, I suppose.
Well, that's the last time I play the tart for you, Jerry.
See, that's why if you weren't watching on the LBC app or the Global Player app or the YouTube channel, you could have seen that in video. But there we are. I grew up with Penelope Keith. She was always a brilliant actress in whatever she did. And The Good Life, I still think, is probably one of the top 3 sitcoms. And To the Manor Born as well, where she played Audrey Forbes Hamilton, who effectively Well, I'm going to let the man who created To the Man Born, the radio play, tell us all about that. John Lloyd joins me now. He's co-creator and producer of the radio play version of To the Man Born, which starred Penelope Keith. While John also produced Not the 9 O'Clock News, Blackadder, Spitting Image, and QI. He's an absolute hero of mine. John, thank you for coming on the programme, because I mean your work collectively has made my cheeks ached. So it's great to talk to you. Tell us about, first of all, To the Man Born. How did it come about?
Well, Ian, first of all, you've made my decade, mate. Pete Spence and Pete was, brilliant writer in radio as a young radio producer, and we set out deliberately to create the perfect sitcom. And we discussed, what is a sitcom? It's people trapped in a situation they can't escape from, who don't really get on. What are the things that divide people? Class, money, gender, that kind of stuff. And Pete wrote the script and I helped him. And he said, you know what? I think Penelope Keith would be amazing in this role. And I said, you're mad. I mean, she's one of the biggest stars on television. She's in the West End, in the Norman Conquest. She did the Parker Pen. We'd never get her. But we sent her agent the script and she said, yes. I could not believe it. Anyway, so I called my booker. I was so excited. I said, we've got Penelope Keith. And she said, who? I said, what? She said, well, I'll look her up. No, she hasn't done any radio for 14 years. I said, but no, that's because she's a superstar. And she said, well, I can only pay her £60 a week. So we made the pilot, which was great because Penny was the most amazing person, apart from being a brilliant actress. And as soon as we cut the finished version of the radio pilot of To the Man Born, she said, John, I'm afraid I'm going to borrow this, if I may, and take it to television because I can't work for £60 a week. So off she went, and that was the last time I saw her.
How does that work when something goes from radio to television? Because it was obviously your idea.
Well, that's not what BBC producers were like in those days. It was never our idea. It belonged to the BBC. I was, contract guy. It was Pete's idea, and Pete rightly became the writer for, however many series it was. He asked me to go with him, but it's funny, you have a relationship as a producer-writer, which isn't the same as a co-writer. And so we had to go, but I wasn't willing to leave my job, and he went off to do it without me. And of course, nobody's saying anything's a perfect sitcom, but that Christmas, the first series got, I think, 24 million viewers, which was the highest audience any television show had got apart from sporting events, live events. So we did all right, I think.
Now, I had to explain to one of my producers, who's 27, who Penelope Keith was. He'd never heard of The Good Life or To the Man Born. And I'm looking
Amazing, isn't it?
I'm looking through my glass at the moment. How many of you had heard of Penelope Keith? Oh, it's actually, no, most of them have. But to our younger listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with her, and indeed these two iconic series, just explain what they were all about and why they became so popular.
Well, The Good Life, and I must admit, as a sort of, hothead young telly producer, radio producer, we thought, well, it's quite sweet, and it obviously is very well done and some bit old-fashioned. But you watch The Good Life now, it's as good as anything on television. It's so witty, it's brilliantly written, and of course it's very predictive. I mean, they were talking about sustainability and, self-sufficiency decades before it became an actual real thing that people did. So it's a really remarkable thing. I mean, really, if you can catch it on catch up, I really would. It's terribly funny, terribly moving, and, amazing cast, not just Paul Eddington, but Richard Briers and Felicity Kendall, a fantastic foursome. We used to do it so well back in the day. And To the Man Born was based on Pete Spence's wife's family, who had a wildlife park down in the West Country. So that was where the inspiration came from. And again, issues of, class and money and that kind of stuff that don't look at all shabby today. It's really, they still stand up, I think. And particularly Penny's performance, because, she was an extraordinary actress because she's presenting as this kind of sort of battle-axey person who knows she's right all the time, but the vulnerabilities are always so touching. She's such a great person.
And into the Manor Ball, she was effectively the lady of the manor.
Yes.
And then I think, what was it, death duties or something that meant that it had to be sold, and she ended up living in the gatehouse.
That's right.
And then fell in love with the British Czech businessman Peter Bowles, who played the character. Well, I can't remember what the character's name was now. And then they sort of fell in love, and it was will they, won't they? It had all the classics of a sitcom, but also a bit of a soap opera too.
Yeah, it's just what we used to do so well in that, the addictive quality of all the qualities of a soap or a drama, but funny with it. That was what's so lovely. And Peter Bowles, again, a wonderful actor and a very, very nice guy in his own right. Great team.
John, I do a podcast called Iain Dale All Talk, where I talk to somebody about their career for quite a long time, generally, sort of hour, maybe an hour and a half. I'd love to invite you to come on that podcast because I think you've been involved with so many fascinating things in your career. I'd love to talk to you further about it.
I'd be delighted, Ian. I'm a big fan of your work, so I'm very honoured.
Enough. I'll get my people to talk to your people, and we'll arrange it and make it happen. Thank you so much for coming on to pay tribute to Dame Penelope Keith, who died today at the age of 86. Right. Awkward gear change now, back to council houses. Ellie says, it's expensive to keep up the repairs on council houses. They don't do it properly and things can fall into disrepair. Well, that is obviously true. Of course, things can fall into disrepair. I don't think it's any more expensive to keep up council houses than any other form of house, to be honest, but there we are. James is in Liverpool. Hello, James.
Ian, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I've really enjoyed my first programme back.
Been amazing, yeah, great to hear you back, you know what I mean? Hope you're well.
I am, thank you. What would you like to tell us?
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you, yeah? It's just a quick one. You're talking about housing, yeah?
Yep.
When Labour, on their manifesto, when they got into office, didn't they say they were going to build 1.5 million houses anyway over the term of this Parliament?
They did, and they've fallen really badly behind in meeting that target.
Yeah, your previous property expert and stuff, I can't remember who it was.
Pete Apps.
Yeah, 1.5 million houses over 5 years. I'm just going to, excuse me a second. Yeah, 1.5 million houses over 5 years is almost 30,000 a week. And your previous, professional was just saying, last year we only built 11,000 in an entire year.
Mm.
How is it going to be possible to build 30,000 houses in a week?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well,
like you were saying before, are there enough property professionals in the entire country to be able to even do that?
Well, look, I'm not an expert in the construction industry, but from what I've read, there is a shortage of tradespeople to make sure that the houses can be built at that level. A lot of the Eastern European bricklayers, builders, they aren't here anymore. I don't know. Maybe we'll look into this in a bit more detail over the course of the next few weeks.
It does seem, numbers-wise, it seems quite a jump, doesn't it?
Well, I've always thought that it's not going to be the big house builders that get us out of this. It's actually going to be giving incentives to small and medium-sized builders to really up their game and expand a bit. And if you can, I don't know what you do, but I'm not necessarily talking about tax breaks, but you've got to give some incentives. Maybe cheapen some of the planning costs that are involved in building new houses for the developer. I don't know what the solution is, but there has to be one.
Has to be one to get the developer needs an incentive to be able to do it in the first place, don't they?
No, absolutely, because.
Sorry, go on.
But no, I just think people forget about the smaller businesses and just concentrate on the larger household name house builders and think that it's all down to them. But in a sense, they've partly got us into this mess in the first place because they've built up huge land banks and they haven't built houses on them for whatever reason. And it's in their interest for there always to be a housing shortage because it keeps the property prices up. Whereas if they build lots of houses, then obviously if there's more supply and the demand it more or less meets the supply, I mean, house prices are not going to go up as quickly. That's effectively sort of where our problem has been. So whoever the new housing secretary is in Andy Burnham's government, it seems to me that's what they need to do, to come up with ideas to incentivise small and medium-sized builders. We've got 14 minutes left in this hour. If I'm talking a load of rubbish and you are a small and medium-sized builder, give me a call and tell me why I'm talking rubbish. Or do you think, no, I've actually got it? Thank you very much indeed, James. It's 9:46 here on LBC.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Andy Burnham vows to put hope in every heart. But having heard his big vision today, are you feeling any in yours? Plus, the government's setting up more ways for asylum seekers to come to Britain. What do you make of that?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Related to the housing industry, not just the people that build them, the people that sell renovations products to them, down to not just the people that build them, the people that sell renovations products to them, down to to B&Q or the DIY stuff available. But fundamentally, it should be seen as an opportunity because there are lots of smart ways that you can encourage a few things. I mean, for one, you just touched on how you incentivise small builders. Well, the council owns the land. One of the biggest costs to a builder is the land purchase. So give them the land free, because they're not going to own it. The council will own it. Let them just charge for the building costs. That's half your cost of the build. I think Ellie spoke to you about renovations and housing stock. Traditionally, councils were falling into disrepair. Well, I think something you mentioned as well, Ian, you have the right to own them for life or stay in them for life. Well, do something different. Have a contract with the council tenant to say, right, well, first of all, no council house can be sold for 10 years, so it then builds up equity for when the council wants to sell it. You have to own, it's just an idea, you have to have rented it for 5 years, and then you sign a contract to say you've agreed to buy the house after tenancy for market value. But then 100% back the mortgage with the government backup, so they haven't got to save a deposit. That will just get the stock moving, and then the council makes a bit of money, recycles the money that we've invested, the taxpayers, and they keep building more stock. And fundamentally, then the stock grows that the council builds, which means there's less people looking for houses, and then, as by the butterfly effect, means that housing prices might drop a little bit in the country, which needs to happen because young people can't afford to buy the house of their dreams in villages because the house prices are off the scale. So it's literally a fundamental thing to start off at the bottom in the housing industry, and that is affordable homes that are council built because they've got a break because the land price has gone, and it just all moves forward.
Well, I think you make a good point there about rural villages, because this could be used as a real way to revitalise some villages. I mean, I think about the village I grew up in near Saffron Walden called Ashton. From memory, about 750 people. Village school, when I went to the school there were 110 kids. I think there's now about 65, so the school is going to be in danger of closure soon.
Yeah.
If there are or were council houses just down the road from where I grew up. A lot of those were sold off, but they sort of revitalised the village when they were built back in, I would imagine it would have been the 40s or 50s.
Exactly.
And the same thing could happen now. I mean, just 10 houses, which any village could cope with.
I think the thing is, Ian, of people of our generation, we've got two views of council stock. We've got the old 70s stuff where it was falling apart, and then we've got Margaret Thatcher selling it for people to do up. Can't you do both? Can't you have that symbiotic where the council build them, and also if you've agreed to buy it, you can then renovate it so the council isn't, they're not beholden to put a new kitchen in, because you said, well, I'm going to buy this in 5 years' time, so I'm going to put a new kitchen in. I'm going to look after it. And then that stock doesn't look, polarised as, oh, that's a dodgy old council estate down there. People will take care of them.
And I remember, going back to what I said earlier about my days in Norwich, some of the council estates in Norwich were really, really run down. Yeah. And then as soon as Right to Buy came in, I mean, they almost transformed overnight. I mean, not just cosmetic things like sort of new front doors. The gardens were well kept, which a lot of them weren't before. People took pride in their homes because they owned them, and they felt that they had a real stake in the estate's future, which just wasn't there before.
They entered into this agreement, definitely. But do you remember all the fake Tudor cladding and the Vera Duckworth bricks?
We'll gloss over that.
But yeah, I think Andy Burnham's. I mean, I've voted red and blue over the years. I just think this guy seems to me like he wants to do something, whereas we all know Keir Starmer wanted to but couldn't. So, and I just think he's hitting the nail on the head. The economy is driven by the housing industry, because, like I said, it's people that sell a bathroom or fit a bathroom or build a house, or it's everything. It's not just the big builders. And just think smarter and out the box. Don't go to the old way of the 70s or the 80s, get rid of it. Have a contract, have a buy-in from the tenant. And if they don't want to buy after 5 years, they can move on and someone else can buy it, that go it, the rent it, that will buy it. Rather than just, we own them and it's a weight around our neck for 50 years. Look at those council houses, they need redoing up, we've got to pull them down sort of thing, because that's the easy trap to fall into.
How long have you been listening to LBC?
Quite some time. I've listened to your show, and I listen to, if I can't sleep, I can listen to what's his face and one of the other Ian. So
Ian Payne, I think you mean my revered colleague.
Yes, you're a revered colleague.
Well, listen, don't leave it so long next time, Steve. Great call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Pat, who's in Gravesend. Hello, Pat.
Hello, good evening, Ian. I would just say it's a no-brainer, Ian. Like I was saying to the researcher there, if you put £20 billion worth of council houses, you have £20 billion worth of assets and appreciating assets, and of course you have a revenue stream. So the capital investment into that will circulate all round. And as an afterthought, any chance of applying the Laffer curve to council rents?
Run that by me again.
Any chance of applying the Laffer curve to council rents to bring down the £70 or billion benefit bill that we have to pay towards not privates but council?
Not quite sure I see the connection to the Laffer curve, but
well, it would be. Say what I'm saying is, well, you know what the Laffer curve is. Obviously.
I do know what the Laffer curve is, but I'm struggling to work out how it relates to this.
It away. So what I'm saying, people on benefits, if they can afford it, you wouldn't have to supply the benefit. Do you see what I'm saying? In that essence, and otherwise it's a no-brainer. £20 billion worth of assets appreciating, so we say, in the hyperinflated housing market, and you also get a revenue stream from it. So the capital investment will be,
okay. All right. No, fair point. Thank you very much. Let's finish off with Dan, who's a first-time caller in Shrewsbury. Hello, Dan.
Oh, hi there, Ian. How's it going today?
Good, well, I am very well. What would you like to tell me?
Right, I've got like a fair idea, like just from an economic standpoint, as to how we could fix the housing market a little bit better.
Yep.
Right. If we gave tax relief for people over 65 to move into smaller houses after they've raised their children and do all the rest of it, so do away with stamp duty, then you would end up with larger houses which are available for people who are trying to bring up children, and there wouldn't be such quite a wealth disparity because people aren't holding on to their houses as long because they want to downsize because they're empty nesters.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are always ways you can do this. Why do you think successive governments haven't done it in the past, though?
Because the generation of people that have 4 or 5 or bedroom houses know that they're getting richer the longer that they sit on their property.
Yeah.
Right? So rather than allowing them to share that wealth with their children or anything like that, or their children's generation, all they're looking at is, an act that tells them how much their house is now worth and how much more it is worth than it was when they bought it. Whereas if you manage to level out the system, so therefore people over 65 who are empty nesters could buy without stamp duty.
Well, of course, I get that. I get that, but of course, Kemi Badenoch says she's going to abolish stamp duty completely, so I suppose that would solve it. Thank you very much indeed, Dan. And Louise says, oh my gosh, you're back. How I've missed the only right-wing person I ever listened to. Your voice is a soothing addition to my evening routine. Well, that's a very nice thing to say. And Joe says, I'm a huge Simon Marks fan, but he's really wonderful. But it's lovely to have you back in your usual time for my regular evening listening. Always a great show. Thank you, says Joe. Well, thank you to Simon Marks for sitting in over the last 2 weeks. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. If you've missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, here's another soothing